Welcome everybody to the Aurora guide. This guide I initially made for my coaching platform, the Mid Lane Academy, but I've gotten so many positive responses and people messaging me that they absolutely love this guide that I decided to release it for free on my YouTube. I'm really proud of this project. I hope you guys enjoy. And if you guys want to get coached by me or you guys want to see more Aurora content, the link to the Mid Lane Academy is going to be in the description. We got matchup specific breakdowns. We got live commentaries in which that we're explaining our thought process playing the champion, Aurora specific VOD reviews, and also some extra resources when it comes to the guide in itself, extra resources on skirmishing, extra resources on mid game. So I really hope you guys enjoy. Who is Aurora? Aurora is a mage-like assassin. She has a lot of burst in her kit. She has a 3-hit passive. She has a lot of mobility. She has good wave clear, good skirmishing. Her R is one of the strongest tools in the game. And she's going to be slippery in the side lane because of her mobility as well. She has a lot, this champion. It's a newer champion, of course, so she has a lot of tools in her kit that she can use. The skill cap on this champion is there also pretty high. Aurora is the perfect shoulder move champion. We talked about the mobility, right? The wave clear, the R and the skirmisher, right? This is the perfect shoulder move champion. She has it in her. She is incredibly good at 2v2s, river skirmishes with her R, and complementing her jungler. And it is basically RE 2.0. Then she does struggle a little bit in the range department, right? And you want to be very intentional with your ability usage and your mobility in the lane. And otherwise, you might just get yourself completely manhandled by some champs that are longer range than you and can just gun you down without you being able to interact that much with them. So, what are the things that we can expect when we're going to be playing Aurora? She has a very skill-expressive kit. The mastery and the skill cap on this champ is really, really high. A lot of creativity and possibilities with the R, with the Fog of War, with the amount of damage that you can be dealing with your Q, with your passive. And that means that your skirmishing is going to be very, very important to break down in your ability to land your abilities as well. She also struggles versus longer range mages, Syndra, Orianna, Wei, Seraph. If you don't know how to navigate these matchups, they're going to be brutal. Of course, we're going to be providing you with some tips and ways to go about these type of matchups. Landing skill shots can be very hard, especially her Q. Her Q is brutal to land if you don't know what you're doing. I'm going to be supplying you guys with some tools to deal with this tough part of her kit as well. We got to get good at tethering, baiting out abilities, good quality movement. Often, if we don't have this, we're gonna be a little bit of a victim in the lane. Her ult, right? Her ult. The first 10, 20 games I played Aurora, her ult was not my strong suit. I did not do well on this ability, but it's an ability that's just very hard to get used to. And whenever you get the hours into the practice tool and into the games just put in, eventually you'll get good at it and you'll master it. And whenever you get to that point, yeah, you're going to feel like you're space gliding on the enemies. And once again, skirmishing complexity cannot be understated. She is incredibly, incredibly complex in these skirmishes. There's so many ways to get out extra damage. It's just really hard to, just even fathom it. Of course, we're going to be going deeper into this in the guide. And the final thing is the more multi-threat divers she has with her, the easier her mid-game will be. So she's really good at engaging and pulling the trigger with her ult, of course. And the more people she has going in together with her, the easier it will be for her to actually do that. Sometimes whenever you're playing against the champions in the enemy team where they have a lot of self-build, a lot of dashes, this can also make a very tricky game. So we're going to be moving on to the rune section of the guide. We're going to be starting off with a classic Electrocute page. This is a rune page that you will take versus middle range champs and versus lower range champions. Electrocute works really well with Aurora's trading patterns because of the fact that Q procs it twice, so you only need one more out attack or an E to proc it. So versus champs that it's really easy to land Q on, that's why you take Electrocute versus. We're going for sudden impact because it really helps with the extra trading power and damage that we're going to be dealing. It's really easy for us to proc because we get so many dashes in our kit. Grizzly Mementos is the easiest to use from this tree and Ultimate Hunter because we're such an ult reliant champ and having ult on lower cooldown is going to give us a lot more opportunities in the game. This is what you can combine then with either precision or sorcery secondary. I think precision secondary is really nice because you get yourself a little bit of extra haste. And the cut down is also really valuable because of the fact that the more damage you deal when someone's higher HP, the easier it is for you to get more damage on the recast of your Q because it works on missing health damage. So this combination is generally very strong and I think it scales really well. But you can also opt in for Mana Flow Band and Scorch. This gives you a little bit more lane power with the Scorch, and it also helps you when you play versus champs that are just generally hard to get through. So if you feel like you gotta get more ability rotations off in the lane versus heavy tank champs with like D-Shield and stuff like that, feel free to run this as well. But you can also make it work with the other page. Now, if you play versus a middle range or higher range champion, it's really hard for you to proc your electrocute with your Q all the time, and therefore I recommend a Comet page. And the Comet page goes together with Mana Flow Band. Once again, you're going to get a little bit more access to mana, and what you can then do is get some extra trading patterns where you just W in, E someone, and just get out. Usually the Comet page also revolves with putting more points in your E, putting 3 points in your E before maxing Q, and you can of course then get Mana Flow Band. You can get Absolute Focus or Transcendence, both is completely fine. I like Absolute Focus because I think it helps me with my burst a little bit more. Most of the time, you're going to be aiming to play on a little bit higher HP anyway with this rune page, and you're going to take a little bit more less committal trading patterns. If you feel like you're playing against the Victor and you cannot really stay above 70% HP, feel free to go Transcendence. It's also really valuable, and Scorch also helps you with a little bit more of the pokey playstyle in the lane. Secondary, you can go Sudden Impact, Ultimate Hunter for the same reasons why we run it in the Electrocute page. These two rune pages are generally the ones that I'm going to be rocking with. I don't really take much else. There are some rune pages in Grasp and such like that you can take, but I've never really found the absolute necessity to really dive deep into those rune pages. When it comes to Aurora's build, you can do as much cooking as you like, but there's a few builds that have been generally incredibly successful for me. And we're going to be starting off with the first item. I like to go either Malignance or Ludens. What's my thought process behind deciding behind these? If I want to be playing a little bit more in isolation and I want a little bit more dual power, in which I'm going to be proccing my Ludens a little bit more, or I'm trying to burst someone and play a little bit bursty, I'm going to be going Ludens. But in situations where the enemies have a few more tanks, or I feel like the game is going to revolve around skirmishes and around my R a little bit more, I'm going to be opting in for Malignance. Both of these items are just generally good. If you do not know, if you're unsure about which item to buy, I actually recommend going Malignance because I think that it's just easier to execute than the Ludens page, the Ludens build. So after that, if I go Malignance, right, what I'm usually opting in for is if the enemies are a little bit more tanky, I can go for either Liandry's, or you can go for Shadow Flame into Storm Surge. Not both. Don't combine them. Either Shadow Flame or Storm Surge. Shadow Flame is really good on Aurora because of the fact that you deal extra damage to enemies that are lower HP. So if you can get your Q recast off when the enemies are lower, it's going to be dealing an insane amount of damage. And it also procs onto your passive procs when the enemies are lower. So just generally, Shadow Flame is an insane item on Aurora. Liandry's is really good as well because you can keep it constantly procced. You get a lot of AoE. It's really good. It also gives you some extra HP. So this is a really good item if you are... if you think like, hey, I'm going to be team fighting against a few bruisers here and there, and I'm going to need the HP, otherwise I'm going to get myself in a tricky position. Liandry's is really good. And Storm Surge is good if you want the move speed aspect of it. So what's the idea behind Storm Surge on Aurora is you, for example, W in, you QE someone, and then you get the move speed bonus from the Storm Surge, and you just run out afterwards and proc the Storm Surge, which is always nice. So if you feel like you need the move speed, you go Storm Surge. If you feel like you want a little bit more burst, you go Shadow Flame. If you feel like you're versus bruisers or a little bit more tanks, or you got multiple AP threats on your team already, you go Liandry's. Whenever you go Ludens, I usually combine it with either Storm Surge or Shadow Flame. I rarely combine it with Liandry's. It's possible, but I rarely do it myself. And then I usually opt in for Shadow Flame because I think the Ludens Shadow Flame combination is really strong. Because if you get an isolated proc with your Q or onto someone, it procs the Ludens fully isolated onto them, gets them low, usually gets them to Shadow Flame threshold. And if you're fat, you can just one-shot someone with a Q combo with Electrocute and Ludens and Shadow Flame. Like, it's absolutely crazy. The damage I've seen done is insane. When it comes to items, right? I usually like to opt in for Sorcery Shoes. If you're playing versus Zinra and many other AP threats, Merc threat is also really valuable. If you feel like you need to kite the enemies because they've got a linear champs that are running into you, you can also opt in for swiftness boots. That's something that's quite rare. I think Merc threat's also quite rare. Usually, I feel comfortable enough with my short shoes, in which that I just default towards them unless there's specific cases in the enemy team, which leads me to jump away from it. I like to usually get refillable potion as well because of the fact that I am trading a lot in Aurora. Trading is very important on this champion. And Dark Shields is really valuable because it's quite easy for you to stack it up. It's really hard for you to die because of the fact that you're so mobile. And yeah, just getting these stacks rolling and getting your damage rolling is just rather easy. How do we finish the build off? Well, usually on Aurora, like we said, it's pretty hard to die. You're really mobile. You're very safe. Also in the side there, you got a lot of defensive tools. So I don't feel like I need a defensive item third most of the time. Either what I do is I go, I say Leandri's here, but it should be Rabadon's, guys, my bad. Usually I go Rabadon's third or avoid stuff depending if the enemies have a lot of MR. But if I feel like I'm going the Malignance into Leandri's build, I'm sometimes combining it with a Cosmic Drive. Because I think Malignance, Leandri's, Cosmic Drive, get a little bit more uptime on the abilities. Yes, you're going to be running a little bit lower on damage. You get a lot of health and you're going to be playing a little bit more like a bruiser, high damage dealer like that, which also makes you really fast, by the way. So it's a really good build if you want a little bit more uptime on your abilities, or the enemies have a lot of dashes, so it's hard for you to just get your skill shots off, especially in the higher ranks. What you see a lot is that people will just, after you ult them, actively flash your abilities on Aurora, and then you just deal no damage. So with this build, you get a little bit more uptime on it. But yeah, usually I'm just opting in for Rabadon's third, and the amount of damage that you're going to be dealing on your 3-item spike is really insane. You can opt in for a little bit more defensive item on fourth. And I also do think that Magi's is a really good item on Aurora, because once again, you're hard to kill, you are really good at killing people, so getting those stacks is pretty easy. When it comes to Aurora's skill order, there's a few options. If you're going to be running the Electrocute page, generally, I like to start with a Q max. I like to start with Q, and I like to play Q max first. So 5 points Q, then E, then W. But if you're playing the Comet page, you're going to be trading a little bit more around your E, because your E can then slow the enemies, guaranteed lands the comets, plus the Scorch and the sudden impact, because you step backwards, which procs the sudden impact as well. And then I like to put 3 points E into a Q max. There's also variations where you put 2 points Q, but I usually don't really like to put more than 3 points in E, because of the fact that then your Q becomes actually really weak, and it becomes really hard to CS the minions with your Q. And usually we get into the point where we get into the later part of the lane, where your Q is just generally going to be having a little bit more uptime. In the skirmishes, it's going to be a stronger ability. So I think putting your Q after 3 points E is just generally the best thing to do. But that's only with the Comet. With Electrocute, you just go for Q max. So Aurora's passive is her 3-hit passive, in which that she regenerates health, and it also deals percent max health damage towards the enemies. And this can stack up to 4 times and refreshes every single stack. That means that you can get a lot of health regeneration if you can continuously stand your ground in trade in combat. That means that extending trades around your passive and being able to stand your ground is going to be a very important fundamental in Aurora. So how does that look like actually in game? We're going to be taking a look in which that I'm playing versus Akali. And Akali's a champ that also wants to be playing the War of Attrition. She's got D-Shield Second Wind. She's got a lot of regeneration in her kit. But as Aurora, you actually don't really care about these champs, because you do a very similar thing in a very different way. Plus you have a lot of burst damage. So versus Akali, I'm actually confident that I can stand my ground in the early game. And I'm actually happy trading with her. So I am confident stepping up aggressively right here. I land myself a pretty decent Q. And what this Akali now does is she actually walks at me. And normally people would start running away. But what I actually do is I run forward. And because I get myself so many passive procs, I get a lot of damage onto this Akali. What also happens is that I'll be regenerating a lot of HP. I want you to guys look at my HP bar, right? Is after I get this done, look at my HP bar regenerating in the meantime. The regeneration is very high, even though I'm still getting hit by minions and I still got no pots active. So you see that the regeneration that's coming up right here is purely because of the passive stacks that I have onto me. So this trade is actually fantastic for me because I got out their pot, I still got 2 pots, and I got my passive regenerating me, which is constantly going to happen when I'm going to be hitting her, especially in the turret. That makes this standing around really, really good for Aurora. Very unintuitive for a lot of players. That's why it's good to mention. So in this sequence, we're going to be breaking down how I'm trading around my passive. As you can see, I go for an EQ into a QEQ, and I get myself my passive procced. And constantly, my goal is going to be trying to proc this passive. So in this case, I keep my Q onto the Akari, keep my passive stacks high, and I E the Akari to proc the passive right here. I Q her, I out attack, I Q her again, and as you can see, that this passive trading is making sure that I don't lose any health. Matter of fact, I'm actually gaining a lot of health in the meantime, and also dealing the most amount of damage towards the enemy Akali. So next up we got Aurora's Q, and I know this is overwhelming. Like, you get instantly slammed into this slide right here with 10 different dot points. The reality is, I just want this to show you guys, and I've got myself a beautiful laning phase in that, which we're going to be covering all of this stuff. I'm going to be touching upon a few points right here, which is mainly on how to land Q. Q is a very hard to land ability for Aurora, and our goal is to try to time it with enemy auto attacks. And this can sometimes be very tricky. The easiest way to do that is, of course, timing it with enemy last hits, with minions dying. But there's also going to be situations in which that we're forced to trade, where the enemies are, for example, running into us, in which that we cannot really time it with a minion dying. In a minion dying. In that case, we want to try to force auto attack trades. Forcing auto attack trades is really good for Aurora, mainly because we have our 3-hit passive, and we're therefore really happy extending trades. And it's also really good because when you force auto attack trades, the enemy is standing still, auto attacking you. And if the enemy is standing still, auto attacking you, that's a different way of a timer that we can actually throw our Q and land it pretty guaranteed on top of them. That's one of the key tricks that you want to keep in mind. This is already going to make landing your Q a lot easier. You can also do that and hold your Q a little bit longer to overwhelm the enemy mental stack. This is also going to be a very important tool. If the enemies are going to be stressed out about dodging your Q, they're not going to be in a good position in which they're going to be able to trade back at you properly. Other tools are Fog of War, really easy to land if the enemy is not expecting it, and also really easy to land whenever you slow them or CC them. Your E into Q combo doesn't work that well unless the enemy is running into you, because you're jumping away, and the E as a cast time as well. But your R is a really good setup tool. CC from your teammates is a really good setup tool. We're going to be taking a look at a full lane phase, and I'm going to be breaking you guys down all of the Qs that I use and the mindset behind them. So in this lane phase, we're going to be playing against the Cassiopeia. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be walking through good Qs, bad Qs, everything. Because there's also some shit Qs in here. And yeah, that's also good to look at. So initially, this Q is timed with the last hit. You can see that this trading pattern onto the Cassio. This minion is dying right here. My minions are high HP. I'm recognizing I'm getting a trading window. So I'll walk up to the Cassio, Q, E, Q, getting myself a beautiful trading pattern right here. And we're just going to be walking through the lane, through the Qs right here. What's going to happen is your Q is also an ability that can stick onto minions. So in this case, my intention wasn't necessarily to hit the Cassiopeia, because what I can do is I can land them onto the minions. And if it lands onto the minions, that's fine as well, because then I can re-angle them like this. You don't necessarily always have to hit the enemy champion. As long as you hit the minions, what's going to happen is if you run in the same line, in the recast, you get 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts right here that are recasting. If I hit the Cassiopeia, what's going to happen is that every single one of these bolts is going to count as a passive stack, which is going to mean that you're going to stack your passive up incredibly fast. And you can see right here, I get myself a beautiful trade onto the Cassio using that particular trick. This is especially good versus mid-range champs and lower range champions. And my idea is there, so therefore also is like, hey, I see that this Cassio is trying to walk up. I try to Q this minion and this cannon, so I prevent her from being able to stand up in front of me and actually being able to zone me. It's also a way that you can actually get some pressure back into lane by putting your Q onto the minions, holding them there before recasting them. And yeah, that's just a very neat trick to be aware of. So in this case as well, We're going to just be clearing the wave. We got ourselves a nice little reset. And we're going to be coming back towards the lane. We're going to do some more little Qs. So right here, next Q that's very important to note. In this situation, we see that there's a little bit of a 2v2 happening. So I W from Fog and I QEQ onto the Viego. This makes it really hard for him to dodge. I jump out of the Fog of War, and that way he doesn't see me throw the Q animation. And if you don't see the Q animation, it's much harder for him to react to or sidestep it, which then guarantees me this kill. So I'm in a really good position in the lane right now, in the sense that I've got myself a red buff. And we talked about forcing out attack traits as Aurora, right? Aurora loves forcing out attack traits. So that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. And you can see that the timing of this Q was very, very crucial. I'm going to be walking you guys through the Q timing, but also Q flash. Man, what a beautiful, beautiful sequence of Q usage here. So I walk at the Cassio, and I'm not throwing my Q yet because I'm waiting for her to hit me back. I'm waiting for her to stand still so my Q gets a guaranteed hit. So I throw it in the middle of my auto attack animation when I see that Cassio is trying to hit me back right here. So because I do that, I land my Q, and I now recognize, hey, she didn't land her Q, so I can chase her. A lot of auto attacks, wait for her flash first, Q flash afterwards, which you can see is a fantastic combo right here. You get yourself the beautiful kill. Let's take a look. Yep, that's it for this particular sequence. We got some more stuff coming up. So right now we got ourselves to the wave clear breakpoint, and we're going to take a look at how do we clear waves as Aurora right now. We do that, of course, by trying to line up all of the minions in the queue, and then, of course, finishing them off with your passive out attacks. In this case, this wasn't a pretty example. I'm probably going to do it a lot better onto this next one. So what I do right here, maybe not yet, maybe a little bit later. Anyway, I'm going to still be trading with the Cassio. You can see the timing of this Q is done when the Cassio is trying to hit me back. So I got myself this beautiful, beautiful Q that I'm constantly landing onto the Cassio, and she's not really able to dodge it because I'm constantly timing it with her standing still and landing and trying to hit me back. So this is then going to be right here a situation that I'm going to try to time it onto the cannon minion right now. So the cannon minion is dropping, and in this case I rushed it. So you can see that my ID was really good. The only problem is I rushed my execution, and therefore she was also able to get the cannon. So if I have a little bit more patience, that would then be fantastic. I got a little bit of shenanigans going on, and this is a wave that I want to be nuking, mainly because of the fact that my Shaco is playing around the grips. There's two ways to do it. You can Q first, and then let the recast of the Q come back, and then E, as long as you proc your passive. But you can also QEQ, and the QEQ is a little bit better because you actually, if you QEQ, you make the minions lower, and then when the minions are lower, your Q recast is going to deal a little bit more damage. As you can see, what I'm doing right here is I'm preparing all of the minions. I'm not using all of my abilities at the same time because that also is going to be putting me in a position where I'm really, really vulnerable towards the Cassio. That means that she can just all in me. So in this case, we do a really good job clearing the waves. And this is the most classic wave clearing tool that you got. Q, you out-attack the melee creeps. E, you make them all lower and you draw everything back. So this is really the good example of wave clearing on Aurora right here. Q everything, out-attack melees to make them lower so your Q recast deals more damage. E the entire wave, then let all of the Qs recast and come back into you. Perfect example of how to do it. The only thing that I missed in this case is that some of my Q recasts missed this minion, so I didn't get it. Sometimes that happens, that's okay. So afterwards, we get ourselves a beautiful roam off on the bot. And what we do is we get ourselves a fantastic, really good Lux Q, by the way. We get ourselves a fantastic high value R, hitting both the Caitlyn and the Lux. And in this case, we get ourselves the kill onto the Kate. It was really easy to land because she was slowed and she was at the edge of my R right here, as you can see. She's super slowed, undodgeable practically, and the Lux kill at the end. It's really easy to land this Q because she's in this direction next to the wall, right? So it's really hard for her to dodge. She needs to walk right there. It's going to get her intercepted in this situation as well. So we walk back to mid. Once again, you're going to see me wave clearing here onto the wave. Q, E, and then the recast Q to finish the creeps off. Very good example of clearing the minions. And eventually, we're going to be in a great position with the Malignants. This is all you need to know about the Q. This is all the little details that you need to know. If you guys have any questions, let me know. We're moving on to Aurora's W. We've got a bunch of clips prepared once again to walk you guys through the possibilities with this ability. Few things to keep in mind, few pointers I want to make before we go into the clips is number one, this is our creative self-peeling tool. It's a dash, and champions with dashes like these always have insane creative tools in their kit. So many opportunities, so many possibilities you can do. You can escape, you can use the invisibility very creatively, you can W forward, W to dodge kill shots, so many things you can do. And one very important point to note is that RW can be cancelled in the animation. So if you are getting CC'd while you're jumping, your W just completely disappears and goes on cooldown and you're in a lot of trouble. Let's take a look at a few clips. We're going to be running you guys through these dot points and the things that you can do with this W ability. One of these things is we can use our W in the Fog of War. And this will allow us to play against longer range champions most of the time and get closer to them without them noticing. And this will then allow us to get a trade-off. So a very good example was here versus the Zyra. We get ourselves this beautiful trade-off, and which we otherwise wouldn't have gotten because she's never going to give us the range to do so. She's going to be tethering us out. But because we use Fog of War, we get into the position where we can actually do that. I want to get a little bit more specific here. What you really have to understand whenever you use this W from Fog of War is you see there's a little bit of this hop animation, right? From here to here. This is the hop animation. You want to make sure that the landing spot of your hop is in the Fog of War. Because in the hop itself, you are still visible. But because you land right here, which is in this case still in the Fog of War, right? I'm now invisible. So that means that if you jump over this wall from here to here, more likely than not, she will spot you, she'll respect, and she'll back off. So you got to make sure that your landing spot's in the Fog of War to get a good Fog of War W off. And in this case, of course, it's a lot of intuition, by the way. If you don't know the exact ranges, play around with it. Just play around with it and see what works and what doesn't work for you. So, another example of the Fog of War W right here onto the Akali. Perfect little trade, in which we can then extend this particular interaction between me and her, getting myself a beautiful kill on top of her. Nice Fog of War W. We got another Fog of War W right here. The main reason why I use it very early, because a lot of people would jump out of the bush, right? I jump into the bush so they don't spot me, because if I jump out of the bush, they will actually spot me because of that same rule. And we can use it to look for engages like these, which of course is fantastic engaging material or catching people off guard, or looking for these opportunities with your go button on your ult. We can also go for opportunistic Ws. These are Ws that can be used versus champions like Syndra or other champs like Ahri that have this one self-peeling ability in their kit. For example, Ahri E, Syndra E, where if they use this, they're incredibly vulnerable. So I'm laning versus Syndra right here, and what I'm doing is I'm actually baiting out her QE. Whenever she Qs E like this, boom, 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 perfect little trading combo on top of her. Getting myself this fantastic trade, which we otherwise would have never gotten because she can always just bump us out otherwise, you know? That's what Syndra is able to do with her increased range and with her self-beating tool in her E. So RW can sometimes allow us to take these good quality trades into these champions with longer range in mid. We now got ourselves a little bit of a W sequence right here lined up, in which I'm going to be reviewing my W usage and breaking it down together with you guys. So, number one is we can use our W to kite the enemy. So in this case, this was a W to get away from the Zek, make sure that he cannot get a CC onto us. I see a play happening on mid. So you jump over the wall, you get yourself a lot of move speed. You can cross a lot of area with that, which then allows me to join in this fight. And the W, of course, resets on takedown. So I take the reset onto the Lucian right here, and I use my W recast to use the invisibility and create more distance between me and the Fiora. So this was a really good example of this final W right here, which I used incredibly well. to make sure that I actually get distance between me and Fiora. So I W away, and I see that she tries to chase me right here. So I go into the opposite direction, create distance between me and her, use my E to finish her off. So really creative, really good W usage right here, which puts me in a position where I'm just generally in safe, and I can actually kill her without me dying. So these are the main things you have to understand about your W. There's a few other like very detailed oriented tricks, but they're not really worth exploring. This is the stuff that you need to know and need to use in your games. Next up, we got Aurora's ult. This is one of the hardest abilities that I've basically been playing around with in a while. It took me a solid 20 games to get used to this ability, actually. It's a really hard ability. So this is an ability that I also really recommend playing around with in practice tool, so you get a good idea of how this ability actually works with. Really getting the drills in on this ability, especially when you're learning Aurora, is going to be worth, because you're going to be minimizing time spent in game. You can just nuke this ability and just drill it in your system. So especially when you're early on in your Aurora journey, this is going to be a very important one to practice, because it's such a hard ability, man. This ability has insane skill cap. So the way that this ability is centered is it's a skirmishing oriented ability most of the time. So a lot of this is going to be combined with team fights. So the most creative usage of R and stuff like that is stuff that we will be covering in the team fighting section. In this slide, we're going to be covering some of the micro aspects of the R, and I got some examples lined up for you guys as well. So one of the things you can do with your R is you can gap close and escape. So your R allows you to go through the portal, right, from one side to the other side, and it gives you a little bit of a dash, and that dash is really good to either gap close or escape from players, really. You can also use your W to travel invisibly in the R. So if you jump into your R with your W, you're going to be traveling invisibly. That's really, really cool, and it's going to be catching up a lot of people off guard. And once again, as I said, we're going to go more in depth in how to actually utilize this R ability in the team fighting and the skirmishing section, because that's where this ability shines the most. So when it comes to the clips, right here, we see the using the R mobility. So I'm in a position right here versus Syndra. I'm doing a really good job in the trades. I R forward, and as you can see, I R forward. I walk backwards on the wall, and I instantly get transported to the other side. That allows me then to get in range to land my abilities. One thing I can do the next time is I can actually W backwards as well to make it invisible. It's not necessary, but you can do that as well. That's how you want to be using your R for mobility or gap closing in general. You can also use it to escape in the side lane. This is just how you do it. You R forward, you click backwards into the wall. That's how you get there very, 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 very quickly. You can also, of course, recast your R to end it early. So another thing you can do is the mobility of the R can angle your Q. And this is going to be a pretty advanced micro tip right here, because your Q is going to be where most of your damage is going to be coming from. So in this case, I see myself a beautiful angle onto the Jinx. I Q plus E, but what happens is that the Braum actually gets only hit by my Q, not the Jinx. I do not land the Q onto my Jinx. You can see it right here because there's only one Q active, not two Qs. I only hit one target, and it hit the Braum right here. So what I do is I go to the other side of the portal, redirect my Q through the Jinx, then go to the other side again to make sure I don't get hit by the Braum R, because I did not hit the Jinx with my initial Q, because she flashed it, right? So to kill her, I need to get to her side, redirect my Q, and otherwise I would not have the damage to kill her in general. So this was a very smooth usage of the mobility in your R to redirect the Q recast of where I wanted my Q to go. And this is, of course, something you have to do if you did not hit your initial Q onto the target. But you can also do this, of course, if you want to hit multiple people with your Q. This is pretty hard to do, though. This is not easy to do. So next up right here is the invisible dash. So I'm going to be, my laner is on resetting right now. I chunked the pike. Look at the damage, guys. This is the champ that we're going to be playing. Insane, no? And we see that the Kindred comes really, really close. And with the Kindred coming in really, really close here, we got ourselves a beautiful opportunity to look for a little bit of a kill. Blitzcrank lands a hook, we land the E, and we go R, and we W backwards, and she doesn't spot me. And then you can see that from her perspective, she's like, where the fuck is the Aurora, right? I'm next to you, bitch. I'm joking with that one. And she's like, where is the Aurora, right? And I'm next to her invisibly. So this is a really, really, really cool tool that you can use to catch enemies off guard. So next up, right, we also got the mid-wave murderer. And this is something that we're mainly going to be doing in the mid to late game, right? Aurora is just really good at just brute forcing and putting the trigger on the mid-wave. Hence the title, the mid-wave murderer. And you can see just absolutely nuke people in this R ability, especially when they're stationary, right? When they do not have the potential to dash out of it or anything like that, then they just fall victim to your damage. This is Aurora in a nutshell. So we're going to be moving on towards Aurora trading patterns. Aurora has very clear ways that she wants to be trading, and that's around her electrocute and around her passive. These two things are going to be constantly going through your mind. And the beauty about these things is that these kind of go hand in hand, because 3 hits is your passive and 3 hits is your electrocute. Nice. So that kind of goes in together. So try to play around your passive, try to play around your electrocute. That's where a lot of your damage will come from, and a lot of your regeneration as well, putting you in a favorable position in the War of Attrition. Your QEQ is your most classic trading pattern there is. Q out attack Q can also be one, but QEQ is just going to be dealing an insane amount of damage, proccing the electrocute, proccing the passive, proccing the sudden impact, everything. Another thing you can do is you don't always have to necessarily hit your Q onto the enemy. You can also hit your Q on the minions and then direct them through on the recast to hit the enemy. And every single little bolt is going to be counting as a passive hit, so that's very important. High value E's are a thing in which that you dodge out onto enemy abilities and you hit them with your own. You can also cut the trade with your E because it slows and it puts you in further distance away. So usually when you go for any opportunistic W's forward, in the sense that the enemies mess up a skill shot and you can W forward, you can then go for a Q, E trade, cut the trade, everything is on cooldown, wait, end the trade with your E, wait until your cooldowns are coming back up, and then you can continue. So I've got a few trading sequences lined up for you guys, in which we're going to be discussing the way of trading whenever you're playing Aurora. So in this case, I'm playing versus Ahri, and Aurora loves out attack trades, as we discussed before, so it makes it easier to land your Qs. In this situation, when I'm playing versus Ahri, what I'm doing is I'm forcing these out attack trades, because whenever she's in an out attack animation, it's going to make it really easy for me to land my Q. That was a really good fake out from Ahri. I got a little bit cocky, and the Ahri actually faked me out right there, and I missed my Q. But what you can do is you can then just extend your trade, walk into the enemy, force out attack trades, and once again, get yourself an opportunity, time your Q with the enemy auto attack animation, so it is pretty guaranteed to land. You do not want to be mistiming your Q with the enemy auto attack animation, because then they're in the movement animation and it's going to be really easy for them to dodge. So in this case, I slightly mess up my trading pattern. I do a really good job dodging out onto the Ahri QE, but I kind of try to force auto attack trades, and I therefore miss my Q and E are out of the range. So that was a little bit of a small mistake, but the idea was good. So we're doing some dodging onto Ahri's abilities. Really good out attack. Hold the Q. You see how long I hold the Q here? She's in range, she's in range, she's in range, she's in range. She's still having the W move speedy here. And I hold my Q very long. And even if I miss it, it's okay, because it's present onto the minions, which means that I can shove it anyway. So this was a really good example of just holding Q, overwhelming enemy mental stack, waiting for the right moment, then throwing it. And right here, really good Q on the back end as well. You can see that the timings of my Qs are incredibly well done. And I'm trading around my passive, proccing it with my E into the turret. And yeah, we see that's just a very nice trading sequence. A lot of good stuff. Small things in which I can also improve, but that's just going to be generally the case. In this next sequence, we're going to be playing around our passive. So in this case, beautiful QEQ trade, proccing the electrocute, proccing the passive. And the main way I want to be pressuring this Akali further under the turret right now is by continuously proccing my passive onto her. So I hit the Q, I recast the Q, and now the passive is still on her because the longer you hold your Q, right, it's going to refresh the passive duration onto her. And I'm constantly being able to keep my passive onto her, extend the passive, and eventually get myself this beautiful solo kill, which ends her lane, completely ends her lane. Next trading sequence. We're going to be playing versus the Ahri again, and you can see that I'm starting with a very opportunistic W in the Fog of War. This is putting me in a position where I can get closer to this Ahri, right, without her noticing and potentially sniffing up on it. Because if I can get a good trade onto the Ahri, I can, of course, beat her because my damage is so incredibly high as Aurora. So what you want to do in this situation is you want to look into the Ahri right here, and in this case, she's scared, right? She spots me. I'm not in range yet. She uses her W to create distance because she's scared, which makes sense. So I recognize that she uses her W, so I'm just walking at her. She needs to CS all of these minions still. So I'm pressuring her very, very aggressively. I do a fake movement right here, and then I go for a QE. And this is a very important one. Look at my movement. I'm completely like changing up my movements, and I'm making her unaware of what my actual IDs are here in this lane. Really good trading pattern, QEQ. Getting mine in a position where, yeah, she's just taking a lot of damage right here. So we're going to be continuing, and I'm going to be trying to pressure her off some last hits some more. In this case, we got ourselves a pike gang coming up here. And I got myself a beautiful QEQ opportunity again. Like, I'm really high health. I'm not in any kind of danger. I put my potion. I see Ahri is disrespecting me, and I can get a nice QEQ trade, get the kill with my out attack. In the end, we got the blitz coming up here around as well. And we get ourselves another kill. Very nice trading pattern into just general good ability usage. So what you can do, right, is you can time your abilities onto enemy last hits. In this case, Ahri does a really good counter trade on top of me. And I try to, like, you can also go for a QEQ in the turret. It's a little bit harder to do. And you see that in this case, I'm also doing a really high value W. I dodge out onto Ahri's spells, and I get weave a lot of out attacks in, which is always favorable for me as Aurora. And right here, she resets and she actually TPs. So this is a pretty smart play by the Ahri, especially timing it in with the pike right here. So this was really well done. So what actually happens is I've got really good ability usage, gets me out of a very tricky situation. And eventually I time my flash Q with Lilia also proccing the sleep from the Ahri, which puts us in a position where, yeah, she cannot really dodge it. And we just get ourselves the free double kill right here. Overall, really good ability usage sequence. Landing my E, landing my Q, right here onto the Ahri whenever she comes in. Take it slow, take it easy, proccing my passive all the time. And in the end, I also proc my passive again with this extra out attack right here. You see that I've got my Q charge onto her, out attack E, proc the passive, then that's constantly what's going through my mind because we maximize our damage and the regeneration, which makes us really hard to kill as well. We got some more trading sequences lined up for you guys. You guys are lucky today. This is versus a melee champion like Yasuo. Versus Yasuo is like most Yasuos think they are the boss, right? They think they can just win lane level 1 by E on top of your face. If you're playing any other mage, that's true, they can do that. But you're playing Aurora, and Aurora can stand her ground because she can redirect Qs through minions. She can also play around her passive, regenerate up. So in this case, I'm just happy standing my ground. This Yasuo's trading into me. I'm standing my ground with my passive. Right? I'm completely fine with that. Of course, I don't want to give him free grass procs when I don't have Q. Mainly want to be timing this around my Q. And a very important thing to do versus a champ like Yasuo is you want to time your Qs whenever he's dashing. So there's a dash cooldown on Yasuo in the early game. And what you'll see a lot is that Yasuo's... let's go back to the level 1 right here. Yasuo's have a dash cooldown of 0.5 seconds. So when he dashes in the animation right here, it's really slow in the early levels. You can time your Q with any of these dashes, which is going to make it pretty much unmissable. Of course, you don't want to just randomly use it before he dashes because then he can dodge it with the dash, and that's like worst case scenario. You need to land your Q, otherwise he's going to fuck you up because you don't have the double passive proc, and therefore the regeneration that's very much necessary. So in this case, right, when he just E's on top of you, just stand your ground. You can do this. You're an Aurora. You have so much inbuilt regeneration in your kit. Beautiful Q flash, proccing out the passive, and this is crazy for a lot of Yasuos. So he comes back from base, And instantly, I'm going to be standing my ground again. I time my Q with either his out attacks or his dashes. Make sure you're not afforded to miss a Q. Like, it's actually, you're not afforded to miss a Q right here. And I'm really comfortable just playing around my passive. You see that the amount of regeneration I have right now is just really, really, really high. And that's just something that you got to get comfortable with in these melee matchups. Like, they get into you like this. They want to extend the trade into you. Just be okay standing your ground. Be okay using your abilities like that. Beautiful QEQ. And he now like tries to get on top of me. I got a very nice high value W. And it gets pretty close, but I play around my passive and I get myself a kill eventually. And you see that this is just a really good example of playing around your passive, not wasting abilities, using them a little bit more reactively into these type of matchups where they've got a lot of dashes, because it's generally just really easy to dodge your abilities because they're skill shots. So we're going to be moving on towards Aurora's lane, and the matchup really dictates the way we want to be playing the lane. It dictates the way we want to be playing the waves and how to use our abilities. The difference between you playing versus a Yone or versus a Syndra is like completely night and day, especially in W usage, in the opportunities that we're going to be getting when it comes to our trading patterns. But generally, what we want to be achieving in any kind of matchup is we want to get to our level 6 plus Lost Chapter to hit our wave clear breakpoint. From this point onwards, we can one-shot caster minions with our Q plus E ability. And this is very important because if we can get to the point where we can one-shot casters, we can start to shove and move. That means that we can look toward and lean towards our winning side. And usually that's where your jungle is going to be playing on. And we want to make plays with our ult. Our ult is one of the strongest river skirmishing 2v2, 3v3 tools in the game. So if you can get this priority and move towards a different part of the map, complement your jungle, you're going to be in a position where you're just going to be playing towards your absolute strengths. Because of that, Aurora also loves neutral objectives. If she can get a 2v2, 3v3, 4v4, whatever, man, around any of these neutrals, we just are so unbelievably strong with our ult because it's AoE, it slows, it's CC, it deals a lot of damage as well because of how many people that you hit. You're incredibly mobile in it as well, so she's just so good at these type of fights. Shove and move is the name of the game, especially in the later part of the lane when you're getting towards level 7, level 8, especially if you're going to be playing versus like mages and stuff like that. There's a chance that if you play against the Syndra, you might just get one shot like from level 8. Even though you're even, you just get one shot 100 to 0. Our later part of the lane isn't the strongest in the 1v1, but we have our wave clear to make up for that. And also our mobility. Of course, we can still look to take trades. The most important thing is that you're going to be able to move towards plays when they are happening. That's really our strength as Aurora. Then, a final note, which is very important in the lane, you got to be willing to use your offense as your defense. You got to be willing to trade. You got to be willing to get dirty, because that's how your passive works, right? If you are not willing to get dirty, if you're not willing to trade, then you're going to really struggle in Aurora because of the fact that a lot of your kit actually doesn't really get used then. So definitely be okay using your offense as defense. Be okay with trading. So the first category of matchups we're going to be discussing are the melee and shorter range matchups. These are generally the easier category of matchups to face because of the fact that we have so much inbuilt damage in our kit and we can constantly play around our Q and around our passive, which makes it really hard for them to exist against us. This also works incredibly well versus door and shield users because we have a lot of burst damage, which is hard for them to sustain up because of how the door and shield works. And the 3-hit passive makes it really easy to proc. And we also have a lot of health regeneration ourselves because of this 3-hit passive. We generate our own health up, which means that we're kind of counteracting their own health regeneration. We can also kite the melee champs really easily with our E and with our W. It's very hard for them to get on top of us, and it makes it very uninteractive for them to trade back at us. And it's just really a one-sided lane most of the time. Playing Aurora into melees is just playing the game on easy mode. It's really important to stand your ground and get the auto attacks in because of the fact that most of the time you actually just win against them. And our goal is to play a slow push onto the waves and time our trades with the enemy last hits, especially your Qs. Especially when you're going to be playing versus better players, is they're going to try to juke out your movement. If you time it with the enemy last hits, it's going to be really hard for them to do that because either they lose the wave, or either they lose the minion, or they get hit by your abilities. So I got ourselves a beautiful example lined up versus Yone right here, in which I'm going to be walking you guys through how to approach the early lane as Aurora. So initially, first thing I try to do is I am out attacking the Yone to get the wave a little bit closer towards my side. And I'm holding my Q because I'm going to try to time my Q with the enemy last hit. Now this Yone does a really nice job of juking me out right there, but that's completely fine because right now I'm going to be like internalizing his dodging pattern. And next time I'm going to try to throw it a little bit more down because I think he's going to try to juke it out again. So we get in the nice wave. We're going to slow push one and get the next one. As you can see right here, I get him with the movement and I'm constantly hitting him, standing my ground and getting the poke off onto him. I'm also constantly pressuring really close towards my minions, mainly because of the fact that I want to play aggressive into him and I don't want to give him any creeps for free. So I get myself the nice 2-wave crash in. I'm constantly going to be trying to play in wave cycles of 2 because that's where I can get a lot of trading windows and continuously pressure him onto the last hits. And you see right here, I am using my abilities on top of him, constantly praying about my 3-hit passive, and suddenly he's lost all of his HP. Great. What we're going to do right now is we're going to once again pull this wave a little bit closer towards my side, and I'm going to be playing in another cycle of 2. And you see how offensively I'm standing right here, just to make it hard for him to actually contest the wave. Only thing is that this wave went a little bit fast because of how the previous wave got played out, but that's completely fine because I can still find all of these trading windows on top of him under the turret. And once again, whenever he's going for these last hits, that's when I'm throwing out my abilities, trying to time it properly. And you see that whenever you land your abilities and you don't necessarily miss them, you're also not going to really be running and the amount of damage that you're going to be dealing is really, really high. So I'm intentionally not throwing my abilities right here because I wanted to throw it onto the enemy, onto the cannon, which I do beautifully. And you see that I'm building this nice CS lead into the Yone already. Whenever I hit him, you see that Aurora's out attack is pretty slow. You got time to still walk outside of the tower range and rinse and repeat the process. So really good out attack Q. And you see that I'm constantly landing these Qs, having these really high value abilities onto him all the time. And I'm putting a lot of pressure onto him on the lane right here. And you see that in this position, I'm also just being okay with sometimes just threatening him a little bit. I'm not throwing my abilities on every single minion because that would make it really easy for him to dodge. In this case, he does a really nice job juking out my abilities, but the recast of Q, which is what you see is very strong in these type of melee matchups, still grants me a passive proc on top of him. And you see that he's already down a potion and he's dropping a lot of creeps in this situation. And I'm doing this all while safe. Aurora's really safe while doing this because you got your W to guide people away with. You got your E to slow people and once again guide. And you got to always keep in mind the enemy dashing abilities. You don't want to be in a position where you're going to be throwing your entire kit into the enemy dash. So they dodge it with the dash and then you got no skill shots left. So feel free to be patient and sometimes just also extend your trading window a little bit towards the next minion. And in this case, really good combo onto the cannon because always the cannons is what they will go for. I tried some aggressive all-in to potentially force his flash, but it didn't fall for it. But he's now so low that he kind of needs to take a reset. So what we'll do is we're going to be hard nuking this wave right here. One thing you see me do is in this case is I hit the casters to finish them off. And then I finally hit the melee here as well. We've got ourselves a beautiful early lane. 44 CS on our reset. 28 CS on Yone's reset. And we're getting ourselves a beautiful Lost Chapter plus a Control Ward. Because now we're going to get into a little bit of the later part of the lane, in which that we're going to try to extend this pressure that we have into different parts of the map. But first, what we're going to do right here is we're going to slightly show a little bit more of this lane, because we're going to be rinse and repeating the process. I'm going to be trying to constantly harass him onto the minions, slow build waves into him, because into these melee matchups, it's really easy to do so. And you see that if he tries to trade onto you, just anticipate that he's going to do that. It's really easy if he dashes onto you to freely land the Q, because when someone's in a dash, they cannot dodge your ability. So you land your Q, you hit the skill shots, and you use your W or your E to either dodge out on their trading onto you. You see that this entire lane, I'm playing on high HP. I'm never in any kind of trouble. I'm always juking out on his abilities, and he's got some fancy movement here and there, which means that he's able to dodge some of my spells. But generally, I'm just in a really strong position in this lane, and we get ourselves a beautiful skirmish rocking up here. and that allows us to eventually take a kill. This was some really nice baiting in this particular play, and from this point, yeah, the game just really spirals out of control for the Yone. A lot of chaotic skirmishes and fights. In the end, it generally goes really well. And what happens is that we get ourselves a beautiful reset right here. And from this point, we're just going to be once again rinse and repeating this process, looking to slow build waves into the Yone, looking to get some pressure onto him in a 1v1, and starting to eventually extend that throughout skirmishes around neutral objectives with my R. And you see that if you ever land a combo onto these champions, you're going to be dealing an insane amount of damage to them, which is just Aurora in a nutshell right here. Like, very strong laner, really good slow pusher, which you can use that to translate your leads into different parts of the map. Let's move on to the next category of matchups. The next category of matchups is going to be the middle range matchups. And these are matchups that are going to be slightly favorable for Aurora. You can also call them skill oriented, but I think Aurora has a little bit more options, a little bit more damage in her kit. So I found these matchups always to be slightly favorable for her. These are matchups that you can run both electrocute or combat in, depending on what you prefer and how you'd like to trade. Generally, we're playing to win, so we're going to try to create a slow push into them to create favorable trading windows, time your abilities with the enemy's last hits. And it's really important to tether well and space well in these lanes, mainly because it's going to get us in positions to trade. Aggressive baiting in these particular matchups will really give us opportunities to look for trades. So if you tether them out and you, what does aggressive baiting actually mean? If you bait out their abilities, and for example, you're playing into a Ryze and this Ryze just uses E plus Q because you're standing next to the minions and he thinks he can get you with it, and he uses E plus Q, no cooldowns, you just jump in, you get yourself a nice little trade and you just get out. So that's going to get you in really good positions to trade. Generally, you want to trade depending on your rune choice. So if you have the Comet and you have 3 points E, you're mainly going to be trading with your E. If you got the Electrocute and you got your points in Q, you're mainly going to try to fish for Qs and look for these Q-oriented trades. I got a perfect example lined up for you guys right here, which is an Aurora versus Ryze matchup right here. So in this case, right, Ryze is a champ that is slightly shorter range than me. Even though he's a middle range champ. So what I'm going to be doing is I went for the combat setup in this particular case, is I'm going to be going for trades around my E. So what I'm doing is I'm standing back when I don't have E up. He's pretty long cooldown in the early game. And I'm going to be in a position where if he mistethers me or he gets too close or he needs to last hit, that's when I'm going to be opting in for a nice little E on top of his face. And I'm also really confident just standing my ground into a Ryze. Mainly because of the fact that I know that if there's out attack trades, I'm winning as Aurora because I can constantly proc my passive. I'm a really good job putting some aggression onto this Ryze right here. I'm confident walking forward. And as you can see, I'm already taking control of the lane by taking good quality trades. And you see that this is really something that Aurora is really good at. A lot of people will not really understand the range that you have on your E. The amount of range you have on your E is absolutely really insane. It's a little bit buggy on the skin as well. And what I do is after 2 waves, I just nicely get myself my vision out. And I'm going to be continuing the slow push and looking to time my abilities with this Ryze in general. So you see that what I do right here, this is a really important concept on Aurora, is I walk up and I hold my abilities. So Ryze knows that I've got 2 abilities, 2 skill shots available. He's going to try to dodge out my skill shots, because if he can dodge it, he's going to stay really healthy. So I walk at him, I out attack first, and then when he's committed behind this wall right here, either he goes that way or he goes that way. That makes it really easy for me to now throw out my skill shots, and you see a max range Q plus E picks up the kill onto the Ryze, put us in a fantastic position right here. So you see that the laning so far has been almost impeccable. We got ourselves a very strong base on Dark Seal plus Amtome, and now we're just going to be rinse and repeating this process. So we're going to be looking to harass this guy onto the cannon minion right here. As you can see, the cannon is dying. I'm actively keeping my eyes on this cannon minion. What do? I step up before it dies, Q plus E, and you see that the amount of damage that you're going to be dealing is really, really, really insane. Now we just wait for our cooldowns to come back up. It's okay to slightly have the wave come out a little bit more in the lane. And now I'm going to start a slow build again, because I do not want to be holding the wave on my side. I'm now going to be starting a slow build, and the way I do this is by stepping up a little bit more aggressively onto the Ryze. And I find myself another beautiful delayed QEQ. And the amount of damage that I'm rocking up versus him right now is really, really high. And he's got no potions anymore, which means that I'm now winning the lane through winning the trades. And the amount of pressure that I'm having here is really, really high. I make sure that I'm constantly keeping good vision. I do not want to get myself ganked and lose lane pressure because of that. I know he's resetting right now, so I'm just putting it really slow on this wave. And yeah, he's now coming back after taking this reset in mid, and we're just going to be rinse and repeating this process. So whenever he's getting too close to me, I'm looking for these E's. In this case, the E was a little bit rushed, but I do gladly land my Q. And you see that even though I've got 2 points in E, the Q still deals a lot of damage. This Q was really good as well. I time it with this auto attack and with this ability timer. And you see them constantly weaving in this auto attacks, proccing my passive all of the time. It's really important to do that because the passive helps you regenerate health as well. And now you see that I'm once again winning the trades here in the mid lane, which puts me in a position of full control. And if you're in a position like this as Aurora, you're going to be winning most of your games because of the fact that you can turn these positions into these neutral objective fights around the dragon, the grubs, and that's where you really shine as Aurora. And what I'm doing right here is because he's so low, I'm recognizing, hey, I want to look for more trades into him. And what I do is I do a nice little trade upon my level 6 timer. I'm a little bit slow with the execution here. I'm pretty sure this is a kill, because what I can also do is I can also go into the wall right here, out attack him. But I was greedy. I thought I had him, and yeah, I don't know. It's just unlucky. Sometimes I'm a greedy guy. So I take my nice little reset right here, and we're now going to be rinse and repeating the process. We got the Rise Flash, and we're going to be trying to just time my abilities onto his last hits. Sometimes I try to also switch it up and time it on his linear movement. In this case, I recognize that the Vi is going to be ganking me. I spotted here on the ward. And what then happens is that I am going to be baiting this Vi in. So I know that I'm getting hovered by the Bard. I know my Talia's in the area. So I'm actually leaning up towards top to bait the Vi into ganking me, because I know that we'll actually win this particular skirmish. So I bait her in, I dodge her Q, and now with the Bard being around, puts us in a really good position right here. We also see that the enemy Yana is coming in, but because we also have the backup from the Talia, we eventually kill the Vi, and that puts us in a really strong position here in the lane. So this leads us to be able to do the grubs, and this is exactly where we get into our power position as Aurora, where we're going to be playing around these neutral objectives, and we're going to now rinse and repeat the process. In this case, I've got my gold from my Lost Chapter. Lost Chapter is a really big item for Aurora because it allows us to get towards our wave clear breakpoint, and I take a nice little reset on Lost Chapter, once again rocking up this control ward, and right now we see that I'm going to be pushing out mid and playing into bot side. Why do I want to play into bot side? That's where the next neutral objective is. Fortunately, my team dies on bot. That's completely fine. And in that case, we're just going to take nice trades onto this Rise right here. You see that I'm constantly playing around my passive. I'm constantly proccing it. So if I need that extra out attack, I out attack first before I E. And yeah, we're really getting into this position where I'm taking a lot of control over in the lane. The enemies haven't been able to start the dragon yet, mainly because of the fact that I've got constant mid prio. I also use my control ward towards bot side because that's the side that I want to be playing on. And this W into E is also really unskilled but very powerful trading pattern. This is something you can do with the Comet, of course. You see them just very slowly chipping away at Rise's HP bar. We got a little bit of a skirmish happening right here, where the Rise is also putting in. You see that some games may get quite chaotic as Aurora. Not necessarily something we mind. We like chaotic games. And we trade 1 for 2. I unfortunately missed my Q, and we lose the dragon. No problem at all. We're going to rinse and repeat the process, and now we're going to try to play on to the next grips. You see what I'm constantly doing as well is I'm jumping from Falk into the lane. And what happens is that I get myself this nice free E plus Comet. And you see that if I just do this 3 or 4 times, the amount of damage I'm going to be rocking up onto the Rise is really, really high. You see that landing Qs onto these middle range champs is also pretty easy to do. And my goal right now is to get a strong reset before the next objective to make sure that I am fully stacked and ready to fight. So what I do is I take myself a reset onto Malignance right now. I TP back, I push the next mid lane wave in. And after that, I'm really happy fighting for this next neutral objective onto the grips, because right here is where we play into our strengths as Aurora. So we got the enemy Yana scouting for vision. She's getting backed up by Vi. That's why she's so deep. And I see this as a beautiful opportunity to look for a little bit of skirmish. We get the Yana R. We get ourselves a beautiful R. And eventually a beautiful pickup onto the Yana, guaranteeing us the next neutral objective on these grips. So this is a really powerful one to also elaborate in a little bit mechanically. So what happens here is that Yana, if I E her here, she would die, but she flashes the E. This is what a lot of high elo players will do. They'll flash the skill shots. But what you can do as Aurora is you can jump into the wall, get towards the other side, and I go for a nice Q with an auto attack to go around my 3-hit passive. As you can see right here, she's got no passive procs. So Q, auto attack, plus the recast of the Q is 3 hits, which means that we get the kill onto the Yana, which eventually guarantees us the grips, getting 6 grips here in this game. And it puts us in an amazing position. Now we're going to rinse and repeat the process around the next R, right? And we're just going to continuously play these type of skirmishes into our advantages while keeping up the lane prio like we're constantly doing. And as you can see right here, yeah, this is just the Aurora Valhalla. So finally, we got the long range matchups, and these are matchups that can be a little bit more challenging. They're still doable, but they're a bit more challenging. And I recommend running Comet into these champions, because of the fact that your E usage trading pattern is a little bit easier to execute compared to your Q, and a little bit longer range. So these are matchups that we got to get in range of, because these champs generally outrange you. And that means that your W usage is going to be very important, and your spacing and tethering is going to be very important. Specifically, our aggressive baiting and our tethering will unlock us in these lanes. First of all, we got to get into range of the enemies. How do we do that? Well, baiting out her abilities first. So if you're playing against a Syndra, if Syndra fucks up her E because you baited out, that means that you can then go forward and take winning trades into them. Whenever you get into their range, you'll absolutely annihilate them. Most importantly, the worst thing you can do as Aurora in these type of lanes is getting stuck under tower and getting harassed. Whenever you're stuck under tower versus these longer range mages, they're going to completely annihilate you, because it's really easy for them to time their abilities with their last hits, with your last hits under the tower, and it's really hard for you to get on top of them. We can use our offense as our defense, put a little bit more pressure onto the wave. This is generally also the strategy I like to use in the first few waves, where you make sure that you actually get a slow build into them. You can use that by just using your HP as a little bit of a resource, investing it, stepping up aggressively, and out-attacking the wave a lot. It's okay if you get hit on the first wave. They don't deal that much damage anyway. And you can just take wave prio and zoe them off. Post 6, we usually lose the 1v1 pretty hard, because it's very easy for them to get damage onto you. But we do win the 2v2 skirmishes versus these type of champs. So really make sure that you use your R around these neutral objectives to get leads into them, because in those type of skirmishes, it's really easy to get on top of them, force extended trades, land your Qs, and just annihilate them, really. We also want to be playing with the concept of threat. It's really hard for these champs to just fully pressure you under turret post level 6, because of the fact that if your jungle's around you, it's really easy to set up ganks on top of them with your R. So post 6, it's not that easy for them to do that. But if they got it fully warded around mid lane and you're stuck in the turret, that's when you're going to suffer. You're going to feel like Aurora is really bad into these champs. And that's like the worst thing that can happen to you. Another reason we want to play with the concept of threat, if you guys take even health trades, it's good for you, because you got more burst power and more kill threat onto them than they got onto you. They're usually smaller wins-oriented champs, so the amount of burst damage you deal is not that high. Well, on your end, it's actually really high burst damage, so the kill threat, if you guys both are at 30% HP, is higher on your side. So, in these type of matchups, trading around Comet is the easiest thing that you can do. If you want examples of this, right, go into the previous example of the middle range matchups and look at the Rise example. In the example that I'm going to be showing you after this is a longer range matchup example. I actually take Electrocute. This was in my earlier stage of the Aurora journey. But the reason I chose that example is because of the fact that I actually show the aggressive baiting and tethering really well. Same with aggressive W usage. Your W usage is going to be very important in these particular matchups. And I think it just does such a good job explaining those concepts. This can be a tricky one. If you guys have any questions about this one, feel free to let me know. Anyway, we got ourselves a beautiful example lined up here, playing versus Syndra, one of these classic longer range champions. And it was the first time I actually played against Syndra. In this case, we start off the game just nice and chaotic, right? This is solo queue. We see that the Elise barely gets out with flash. I want to take an extended trade into the Syndra, but guess what happens? Enemy Leona shows up with Ignite, with Flash, and I actually die. Completely blows, of course. Like, stuff like this can ruin your lane. Anyway, doesn't really change the way I want to be approaching the lane. Syndra also used her flash. I'm really happy trading flash like that because I've got a Shaco. She's got to be a little bit careful. I got a lot of high threat in my team, as you see right here. So it's not the end of the world. One thing I'm going to be trying to do versus Syndra is I'm going to try to dodge out on her Q very, very aggressively. Like I'm going to aggressively try to tether her Q because I know that if she has no Q, she cannot really damage me. I'm also going to try to make sure that she doesn't really proc. She doesn't really get the opportunity to stack big waves into me. And this was a really good example of nice faking movement right here. Dodging out her Q, preventing damage taken therefore, and me being able to just get my creep for free. So I try to trade onto the Syndra right here. We trade out Electrocute for Electrocute. This is worth for me. I've got regeneration in my kit. I've got more burst than she does. So I'm really happy with this trade. You can see that this is a very favorable trade for me therefore. So this is the stuff that I'm going to be replicating. You see that I do not give her the opportunity to stack a big wave into me. I used my Q initially to thin it out by a bunch. And I'm auto-attacking a lot to also make sure that she's not going to be able to do that. I try to go for a little bit of a cheeky trade. I unfortunately miss my abilities, but that's fine. I'm still going to try to go for these aggressive trades and slow push into her. If I can get a slow push into her, I'm really, really happy with that. So I try to bait her in to my Shaco. Unfortunately, it doesn't work out too well, but she does mess up a little bit and actually allows me to take this Electrocute trade, which now solidifies myself lane control. She's got no pots anymore. I've got pots still too, so I'm in a really, really strong position right now. And that means that I am now the one that can control the pace of this lane, which I'm very happy with because this is not an easy matchup. Of course, this matchup skills with, it's also a little bit of a skill matchup. The better player will come out ahead in the matchup like this. If you're playing versus a Syndra player that's better than you, you're gonna get your ass completely handled towards you. So yeah, don't be surprised if you get completely annihilated by Syndra if she's just as good as better than you. This is a tricky matchups. You just gotta outplay the enemy and get yourself a way back into the lane. So Syndra is now forced upon a reset. She still has TP. I do not. That means that I'm forced to hard nuke this wave right here and get myself a reset as well. I miss all my minions. Don't look at my CSing. But we're coming back here with Amtome and Boots. And Boots is going to allow me to make it a little bit easier for me to dodge out onto her abilities. And it's going to make this movement and this baiting, it's going to make it a little bit better for me. So from this position, what I'm trying to do, right, is I know that Syndra has QE, and that's a very problematic ability for me. There's two abilities because they nuke me, number one, and they can prevent me from getting close. She can basically use that whenever she wants, whenever I'm getting close to her. So I need to bait out that QE, and then I can actually go and look for a trading opportunity. So that's exactly what I'm doing. I bait out the QE, and I instantly W forward, getting myself this beautiful out attack into QE trade, nuking half of her HP bar. And that's really what we're going to be trying to do, because this is going to put us in a position where if we get like one or two of these trades, we're going to be in complete lane control. She misspaces, she gets in front of the minions, and she gets hit by my Q again. And now we're in this position where we got like lane control because we were able to use our offense as our defense right here. And yeah, now I'm just in a really safe spot in the lane. Of course, this is still not the hardest part of the lane. We're still in a position in the lane where it's actually significantly playable. And you see what I'm doing right here? I'm intentionally walking inside of her range, baiting out her Q, then dodging it, which is going to grant me more opportunities to look for harass onto her. In this case, I'm overwhelming her mental stack as well by stepping up aggressively, allowing my Rakan to get a beautiful gank into a beautiful Electrocute proc, solidifying his full control of the lane right now. And there's not really anything that she can really do against me anymore. You can see how aggressive I'm stepping up, not necessarily with the intention to do anything. I even take a turret shot, doesn't matter that much. But not just to zone her off and to put pressure onto her, potentially bait out her abilities. Because if she messes up her abilities, that's when I can actually go for a potential trade or even deny her like XP or something like that. So I get myself level 6 and I get myself this beautiful R combo to dive her. And we get ourselves a fantastic solo kill into the Syndra, nuking the next wave into a reset, getting ourselves a Lost Chapter and a No Magic Mantle. And this No Magic Mantle is really important because I'm also playing versus Elise. And from this point, the lane gets brutal. It gets really brutal. I may be ahead, but it gets super hard. Because Syndra is starting to get to the point where she gets a lot of points in Q. If she lands these Qs, she's going to be super strong. The amount of damage she deals is insane. So the null magic is actually going to allow me to survive in these lanes a little bit better. So still, what I'm going to do is I'm still not going to give up. I still need to play with my offense as my defense. As you can see, I'm going for these QEQ trades onto the Syndra right here. And the lower she is, the easier it is for me to actually put pressure onto her right here. So there's a little bit of a skirmish happening, which is a bit of a tricky one, because it's actually me that's getting turned upon here eventually by the Ornn, and my W gets cancelled by the Ornnar. So this is the first time this happened to me. I never knew that CC could cancel you in mid your dash, and therefore I lost my invisibility. So that kind of was an eye-opener for me. I was like, holy shit, I didn't know that was a thing. Anyway, I get myself a refillable potion. I still got myself the null magic mantle, and yeah, we're still in a really good spot here in the lane. And what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to now still continue with the same thought process. Take good quality trades if she allows us. In this case, I get myself ganked by the Elise, so I'm forced. Once again, I get my W cancelled. By the way, that's kind of unfortunate. There's really good learning here in that aspect. And you see that it's really hard for me to play right here already because of the insane range onto Syndra. So I'm able to just catch all of the minions right here. I eventually get myself a nice little reset onto Mercs. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm stronger than Syndra. I've got Mercs. I can actually beat her right here. But what's going to happen is that I'm going to get myself completely reality checked. And this is this game really let everything click for me in these longer range matchups, is that from this point, especially when Syndra got a Q upgrade, I try to use my offense as my defense. I try to trade onto her with my passive, but she just completely stat checks me. Like, she completely annihilates me here in the 1v1. And this was my most important revelation, in the sense that, hey, I knew this is not something that you can do. You cannot really trade, even though you're slightly ahead, you cannot really be that aggressive in your trading in these type of matchups. You really have to only do it opportunistically, otherwise you're going to get yourself nuked. And in this case, right, you can see that because of me doing this, I'm put myself in a really hard position. I use my ult, I cannot play with my jungle, and in the end, like, we do fortunately outplay the Syndra right here, but it got a little bit closer than it had to be, especially with my team being so far ahead. So you can play opportunistically, but don't brute forces into these champs, because they will beat you. They will absolutely beat you. So in an ideal world, what we're actually going to be doing is, whenever we got the wave clear breakpoint on Lost Chapter, is we're just going to be handshaking waves and only trade opportunistically if they mess up big key cooldowns. Otherwise, we're going to be handshaking waves. We're going to be shoving moving together with where our jungle is going to be at. We're going to be aiming for these 2v2s, 3v3s around neutral objectives, because that's where we're going to be much stronger ourselves as Aurora. So we're going to be moving on to the place where most games are won and lost on Aurora, and that's the mid game. Aurora is a fantastic champion in the mid game because of how good her skirmisher and her team fighting is. She also has incredibly fast wave clear, and the way that she wins the game is through finding picks on mid or winning team fights around neutral objectives. She's a skirmisher at heart, and that's what she does best. The main way we're going to be doing that is around our R cooldown. Our R is so broken in these fights. It hits everyone, it slows everyone. It's so oppressive, man. This ability is so fucking broken. The way that we want to be approaching the mid game in general is by shove and moving. Sometimes you can like pressure the side lane a little bit more, but generally we are not that strong in the side lane. Our abilities are easy to dodge. We got medium length cooldowns, and that means that we're really good at just nuking the wave, getting out of the side lane and approach and going towards mid lane, or shoving and moving into other part of the map, in which we can then force man advantages, and with our go button on our R we can then make plays. We really want to identify the next neutral objectives in the lull states, and we want to make sure that we play around them. And of course, these team fights around these neutrals is how we're going to be winning the game. Aurora is incredibly deadly on the flank. We want to be abusing the Fog of War to get really good R angles. If we can get a good R angle, that's when we're going to be incredibly oppressive for the enemy team. Flanking doesn't necessarily mean come from the other side. No, what Aurora likes to do, Aurora likes to actually come from somewhat of a similar side. So if this is where your team's at right here, I'll quickly make a note for you. If this is where your team's at, this is where the enemy team's at. We as Aurora do not want to be coming from the other side. We usually want to be coming from a little bit of these sides right here, because then if we're coming from the other side, it's really easy to get pincered. So got to keep that in mind. We also want to identify the enemy squishies and carries and look to catch them onto the mid lane wave. That's why we call Aurora the mid wave murderer. We're going to be reiterating the importance of the mid lane wave a lot in the examples. And yeah, our engage range is, of course, absolutely massive combined with the style of our W. And yeah, we're going to be taking a look at a few examples in which we're going to be breaking down the mid game. The first example is going to be an example versus Ryze. We've seen the early lane example already. And this is a classic Aurora mid game in which I'm going to be walking you guys through what I'm thinking and what we're supposed to be doing. So in general, if we look at this little state right here, we see that the game is overall, it's a tricky game state. Top lane is a little bit behind. Jungle is pretty even. Bot lane is a bit behind. We're really far ahead though, so it's fully in our control, and that's amazing. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be playing towards our identity. We're going to be playing on our tempo. We're going to be dictating the game. Utilizing this little state, recognize that we got our next neutral objective is going to be the dragon. We got 6 grips overall. Game state's completely fine. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to be pushing mid lane wave and going towards the grips towards the dragon to potentially find a fight with our R. So what I'm going to be doing constantly is I'm going to be hard shoving the mid lane wave right here, and I'm going to be moving to get some control around this side. I'm already pinging actively on the dragon. You see that I'm pushing out the wave. I'm not trying to harass the Ryze or kill the Ryze on the turret. No, I'm trying to translate this pressure into the dragon. So we've now done a little bit of a play. We got ourselves the enemy blue buff, and that means that right now I'm going to be catching the next mid lane wave really, really deep. I'm asking my team to start the dragon up because I know that Ryze is in base. Which is something that we're trying, but Ryze actually TPs in through bot. And that means that it's really hard for us to start the dragon right now, because if you look at Corki, he's split up from the team. So we cannot really start Drake because Corki is going to have a really hard time hitting. And that means that instead of starting Dragon, we're actually just going to be hitting turret. Why is it good? We got 6 grips and Ryze TP'd in on bot, so he's split off. And that means that hitting turret right here is very, very effective. Bart's getting a little bit chunked, which is going to make it pretty hard for us to eventually fight around this dragon. But we get a lot of damage onto mid tower. Vi gets a little bit anxious, and she actually makes a really big mistake going for this engage, getting stunned and getting instantly killed. And this is really, really good, right? Because this now with Vi, that means that we can actually start the dragon up. So I still got R, right? I've got TP, so I'm confident just resetting, porting in. And because of the fact that Vi was dead, I'm really confident in this particular fight. Unfortunately, the Taliyah gets caught, but it's still completely fine. Cassandra is TPing in. I get a beautiful R angle into a nice combo onto the Yana, one-shotting her. And that leads us in this position where this Cassiopeia right here as well is going to be overextended and really, really vulnerable, which allows us to get the Cassio kill. Really nice E, not allowing her to kill me. And this puts us in a position where, even though it's a really messy game state right now, a lot of fighting, I can just nicely take myself the reset, and I'm pretty confident we can get ourselves a dragon. Why? Because Cassio's dead, Taliyah's there, Cassandra is there. So right now, it's really up to me, hey, where do I want to go? Top lane wave needs attending to, but there's also a little bit of a fight happening. I made the decision that in this case, I feel comfortable that my team can actually win it without Cassio in a 4v3. So I feel comfortable answering the Ambessa on top here and making sure that I'm just going to be following this Ambessa's path. My suggestion was also, I think that we should be able to take the dragon before she's able to intercept there with the Bard E getting out, of course. So I nuke the top lane wave, and instead of taking an extra top lane wave, I instantly go mid because I'm a little bit more around the action. Team is winning a fight, which is absolutely fantastic. And now I'm just going to be pushing mid. If you don't know what to do on Aurora in the mid game, just push out the mid lane wave and try to force a fight with your arm on mid. That's amazing. So I push out the mid lane wave. Really, really nice stuff. And after pushing out the mid lane wave, we now have the potential to move. This is what we want to do in Aurora. Shove and move, shove and move. So we shove out the mid lane wave. And now we see that there's an opportunity on bot, which we instantly capitalize upon with a beautiful W plus R, and we are able to one-shot the Yana, and eventually also the Cassiopeia right here, which puts us in a fantastic position in the game. I'm really getting back right now. So I'll instantly reset, and now we also take ourselves the sweeper. We're coming into base right here, and we got to ask ourselves the question, right? Of course, what's next? Right, we see that the Rift Herald's up, we see that Corki's pushed in bot, and I got no R for 48 seconds. So what are we going to do? Well, we can open a bot, but bot lane wave's already really, really far pushed in, so there's no reason for me to open a bot right now. It's very inefficient. So I'm going to go open up mid, push the mid lane wave, and take control of the top side of the map, because that's where the next objective is going to be up. No one needs to respond to bot right now, because bot lane wave is still completely neutral. So I'm going to be pushing in this wave right here, and we see that Ambessa is now on bot lane. I help my my Bard getting the prio and getting some vision right here. It seems like Corki's opening a bot. I think Corki doesn't necessarily have to open a bot. He can also just commit right now, push the mid lane wave together, and we'll actually just trade bot tier 1 for Herald plus top tier 1. But I don't think he really understood the assignment. That's completely fine. So we'll just take control of the next mid lane wave. And after that, what we're going to do is we're going to be moving up towards where the action's happening. You see that the Ambessa plus Yana are playing bot there, trading sides of the map, which is really, really smart. And that means that Corki's trying to defend. Corki doesn't really understand the assignment, but that's completely fine. He dies on bot, and what happens right now is that we just get ourselves the Herald. I keep the mid lane wave pushed, and what happens is that we see that the Cassiopeia overextends, and that allows us to take a little bit of a pick onto the Cassio as well. And once again, who cares about bot lane right now? It's unfortunate the minions are dying right there, but what I'm just going to be doing is I'm going to keep up the mid pressure. I'm going to get the tier 1, and we get the tier 1 on top as well, and that puts us in a really commanding position right here on the map. So we're going to be rinse and repeating this process. Right now we recognize in base, next objective is going to be Atacon. We recognize that top is neutral, so we don't necessarily have to open up top. We want to be playing mid into bot side. That's going to be the most consistent way of playing the game. Whenever we keep the mid lane wave pushed, that's going to mean that the enemies are going to be really struggling to contest the vision, contest the area control, because they're always in a position where they have to respond to the wave, where they're late. And that means that we get control because they cannot play on the side lanes right there as well, because it's really easy to play a little bit of catch, hide and seek whenever you go push in the mid lane wave and then rotate up into bot. So the enemies are starting the Atacon, really big mistake because of how the Atacon plays out. And I try to flank right here onto the enemies. We see the Cassante TP. Vi tries to hard engage onto me, which is very smart, but Aurora, you're really slippery. And what you see actually is that you can just very nicely just get out with the R. And since I'm so fat and with my W resets, I'm just in a really easy position, just playing the skirmish out, landing ourselves a beautiful Q onto the Ambessa as well. And that means that this skirmish is just very, very easy for us to play out. And yeah, that was just really, really nice, shoving mid into moving down, creating also a favorable position for this fight. Fight's over. First thing I'm going to try to do, keep the mid lane wave pushed, right? Because after mid lane wave being pushed, that means that we constantly force the enemies to respond. It's really hard for them to get control back of the game. And we get ourselves the nice little Atacon right here. And after the Atacon, once again, right, now the dragon's up. So we got to ask ourselves the question, what's next? Boom, we got R up, ticking all of the boxes right here. And that means that right now, I want mid lane wave to be pushed again. Right? Because if we can get the mid lane wave pushed, we can get good access towards this dragon. So I ask assistance on the mid lane wave, and look at that, Cassiopeia is trying to get prio on the mid lane wave. And this is why we call Aurora the mid wave murderer. As you can see, really nice nuke onto the mid lane wave with my R, locking the Cassiopeia up, guaranteeing us the dragon. And now what we got to ask ourselves the question is, what's the next objective? Where are we going to be playing? Well, in this case, I want to be playing bot side. We want to be playing bot side because there's the tier 1 on bot still up. It's time to get it. Cassante is going bot. Great. What I'm going to do is I'm going to push top. After pushing top, I'm going to shove my pressure, translate it into mid. I cannot really push an extra wave right now because I don't have any vision on top. So I don't bother playing top right now. I pushed in the wave. I'm now going to be moving mid, getting prio onto the next mid lane wave, and then we can play mid and bot right here. Really classic form of translating our leads. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing. We get prio onto the mid lane wave, we pop the Herald, Cassante is taking bot, I shift my pressure from top into mid, and after mid, I want to shift my pressure into bot right here, getting the bot turret as well as the mid tier 3. I'm not really looking to fight right here, like we can actually with the Atacon, but yeah, I think I should have fought a little bit harder. I just found it really hard to find an angle, and we do eventually get ourselves the inhib, which is great. But yeah, like potentially we should have fought here a bit harder on the end of the Atacon. And I recognize that we cannot really continue to fight right here, so we just back off at the end. And we this is a really messy situation. I think I could have done a little bit better job calling this off in advance. Eventually, like, the situation does end up pretty well because we're now just incredibly fat and we get ourselves a beautiful skirmish. And afterwards, we're instantly just going back towards pushing waves, playing around these neutral objectives. We get ourselves the Baron. Now we ask ourselves the question, what's next? Well, I really want to be playing into top because there's still top tier 2 available. So I'm going to be playing mid into top. Make sure, ask myself the question, can my team get mid lane push on their own? If the answer to that is yes, I don't necessarily need them to go be mid to help them because they can already get it on their own. So we get the mid lane push into the top. And I'm asking my team to push mid lane because if we can keep mid lane push, we can play multiple lanes. And you can see in this situation, we're just brute forcing the enemies down. I'm really looking at an angle right here, see if the enemies ever misstep. So I W from Fog of War. What's really important to recognize is that this is where the enemies got vision, right here. So if I W in behind this line, they also got a ward right here. So this is where they got everything lit up. So if I W behind this place, they do not know that I'm going in right now. We land ourselves this beautiful R. I kind of fuck up my Q. Sometimes that happens. But it's enough for this fight to work out because we're so far ahead. We got all of these grips. We're just incredibly strong. And it puts us in a position of total control here. Fights like these are absolutely in our advantage as Aurora. Eventually, we find ourselves a beautiful flash Q onto the Yana and the Cassiopeia, which will then allow us to end the game throughout a very spectacular fashion. Really clean mid game. We kept up the control. What was very important things to notice, we kept playing around the next neutral objectives with our ult. We had good skirmishing. We kept up the priority on the waves. And we didn't really try to isolate or sideline or 1v1 someone. We just really tried to keep up the pressure of the game, force the enemies to respond, and then make a play, ideally in a man advantage. And that's how we just got these constant good fights. Never really got into a position where we were really, really risky or like throwing our lead. We always kept the control of the game, and we just won by better fighting, playing towards our strength as Aurora. For the next mid-game sequence, we got ourselves Coach Curtis helping us breaking it down just for some extra firepower. And we also got him in the team fighting section joined in as well. For the next mid-game sequence, this is going to be a little bit more of a messy mid-game sequence. A lot of fighting, a lot of chaos going on, and a very messy game state as well. So we're going to be walking you guys through our thought process and what are the things that we can latch upon to understand how we come to these conclusions and how we make these decisions in game.
So first things first, diving in, we already know this is a tricky game, right? And the reason we know that is because our comp lacks multi-threat. So when you're playing Aurora and you have a lot of divers, you have Leonas and you have Camilles, you have many divers, the more divers, the easier it gets, really. And in a game like this, the only person that can complement us on our dive is Kha'Zix, and a 0-3 Kha'Zix at that. So we already know straight away off the bat that this is not going to be easy. And then if we take a look at this as well, bot lane kind of seems like they struggled in the 2v2. Top lane, Teemo hasn't really got that much of a lead. So, looking at this game, not easy whatsoever. So, Tim, as we're moving into this mid game, what's kind of at the forefront of your mindset? How are you thinking? What are you prioritizing here?
Yeah, that's really good. So first of all, right, we have 5 grips. We got 2 dragons. So we did get access to the objectives. And that is a massive relief because that means that we got time this game. We can stall if we would want to, and that doesn't put any pressure onto us because we can now make decisions to either give or fight objectives depending on if it suits us. So we got a lot of options in this game. We have a potential Dragon Soul win condition if we can get to them. We also have potential other options in giving them, but there's a lot of few other little Aurora things that we see when it comes to the team compositions. So we're playing versus a Jinx, we're playing versus a Varus. These are 2 very squishy carries, and the benefit of these 2 carries is that they do not have any type of dashes or self-heal. 0, actually. And that makes it really easy for us to assassinate them if we want to. Hence is why I also go for the Malignance into Shadowflame build. It's because I know that these guys are squishy, and I know that I can therefore assassinate them if I want. A few other things to note. With the scaling aspect, we do have a smolder. So the smolder plus the fact that we got the objectives already puts us in a position where I'm at ease and I actually feel pretty confident in the game.
Yeah, I think you raise a really good point about the immobility here. It's really worth noting. There's a very big difference between versing an Ezreal and a Jinx. You know what I mean? And so I think here, the fact that we're versing 2 immobile carries is a really big plus for us as Aurora.
Yep. So we see currently we're coming off of a little stat right here. We are we're currently dead, and we see that my team is dead as well. Everyone's getting pushed in. Few things to note. I do not want to be matching Sion. I will not be able to do anything against Sion. This guy completely walls me. I have no percentage HP damage in Leandris. Sion's not an option. I want to verse Varus. If I can verse Varus, I can kill him, or I can pressure him through shoving and moving in general. Shove and moving is going to be super good in general because of how immobile these guys are. So I'm going to be needing to look to find a lot of windows through my shove and move and make stuff happen on the map.
Yep, love it.
Knowing that information, that means I'm opening up to bot. And because Sion was shown top, Varus was shown bot, that means that I want to be initially putting myself in a position where I can avoid the Varus. And just right now, it's going to be wave clearing and taking it easy. We got our R coming back up in 8 seconds. And if I see an opportunity that presents to me, I will take it. And main thing, especially in the situation where you're behind, you want to be looking for man advantage plays. In this case, I know Varus is dead, and I see my team is actually interacting with the enemy team. Knowing that I have R means that I can force this man advantage play onto the enemy team.
Yeah, this is what I love about this play is that it's just opportunistic. Holy
Yep.
moly, that was a crazy sign-on play.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Okay, okay, I think this is a really, really important point. At the end of the day, guys, Aurora is a skirmisher. Okay. And so if you have, I mean, this is why having your empowered TP ready to go and using your lull states to be aware of where everyone's location is. But B, we also have our R, right? And so here, what I love about this is that no hesitation. We know we have a man advantage because Varus is dead. We know we have our empowered TP. We know our team is in the action and we have our R. So no hesitation. We go in, we send it. What I love about this as well, we're not afraid to use our W aggressively here because we can get the reset. Right? We knew that Braum was a low target. We can get the reset here. So, this ticks every single box. And a lot of you may say, oh, isn't this luck? Well, welcome to League of Legends. There's going to be a lot of opportunities like this. You guys need to keep your eyes peeled and understand, in these lull states that, they're going to happen. And as long as we know we're ticking those reference points of are we playing in accordance to our teammates' location, do we have our R, et cetera, then it's going to be A-OK.
Yep. So unfortunately, play doesn't work out the way exactly how I wanted. And yeah, you gotta sometimes be in positions where the enemy team makes a really good counterplay. And you gotta give credit where it's due. This was an insane science positioning.
Play. Really, really
insane play. Yep.
But
so good attempt though.
Good attempt. Again, the thought process itself was, perfect. Really, really what you're looking for.
Yep. So we're gonna now try to rinse and repeat this. Right? We have the potential to create man advantages. It's kind of the way that we need to get back into the game. Either we scale or we find an opportunity where we play in a man advantage and we can hard force onto their squishy and mobile targets. Those are really the options that we have. I see Sion top. I know Dragon's coming up. What do? I open up to bot side. I do not want to be versing off against the Sion. I want to be versing off against the Varus in my lane.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting again that a lot of Aurora players would feel very strangleholded in a game like this, and that's perfectly normal. You're in a scenario where you're not going to have a ton of mid prio. You are going to have the game is going to be a little bit messy, and you have to lean into that. And Aurora likes that. Aurora doesn't mind a bit of a messy game state. So keeping an open mind and trusting in your ability to find a pick window. You know what I mean? Like I think Aurora is one of those champions where if you're playing the game by the book, like here we go, here's my team, I'm just gonna find that perfect team fight. You're not gonna win. You're not gonna have success with the champion. So and lean into the chaotic nature of the champion. So going back here in this lull state, if you even just go a little bit further back here, Tim, you don't know what's gonna happen. All you're thinking about is, okay, I don't have my R. I don't want to deal with that Sion. Give me some farm. Wait for my R to come back up and look for a play, right? That's it. Shove and move. Now, in this case, it's not like you planned this out. It's like, okay, well, the enemy, went for a bit of a pick. We're playing in accordance to our Kha'Zix, our teammate location. Great. And this is what we call, again, another opportunistic play here.
Yep, that's correct. And we see that the Varus actually gets a really, really creative, really nice pick onto Mayana. But he actually flashes out. Kha'Zix evolves mid-battle. And I think we can potentially look to take the play because I can extend my my mobility with my R. But Varus actually does some insanely good movement.
Crazy movement.
Completely baits me out. And that gets my Kha'Zix killed. So you can see that it's a very chaotic game. A lot of stuff is happening. But I am trying to be opportunistic and I'm trying to look to get back into the game. what we talked about, right? We got time. Giving this dragon, no problemo.
Yeah, no stress at all. And now the mindset needs to be okay. We don't have R. We want to slow it down a little bit here. Let Timo make someone react, and let's just chill. Now it's downtime for us as an Aurora. We don't really want to be making a play here. So it's all about chilling, relaxing, maybe sweeping a bit of vision, getting a reset, and then making sure that we are adopting the appropriate lane assignment. So look at this. The moment Tim sees that Varus is top and Signer's bot, we actively make a conscious effort to swap those lane assignments. We cannot afford to be stuck in a bad lane assignment, because what happens if you don't get prio? How are you going to shove and move? There is no shoving and moving, and that's the core. That's the cornerstone of Aurora's identity. If I'm going to nitpick a little bit here, I probably would have liked to see some more communication in the lol states from Tim to actively ping the Teemo bot. Again, his intention was good. There's things that we can do to probably better influence that. So Tim, get your shit together.
I actually had a different plan here, Curtis.
All right,
You're a step behind here, Curtis.
Oh, okay.
The idea here is to hard force with Teemo on the same side. We're sacrificing bot and overloading on Baron here.
Yeah. Look at sneaky Baron play, potentially, if you get a pick.
Exactly.
It's high risk, high reward, right? If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it's a bit of a disaster, right? Because you're going to lose that tier 2. So look, for me, I don't mind this play. The reason I'm not a massive fan of this play is because you don't have your R. If you had your R immediately, I think it's not bad. Like the fact that you have to kind of wait and kind of chill and wait for your R to come back up, it's just too slow in my mind. Now we're really getting into the weeds. This is me and Tim kind of butting heads here. But like, again, the key here that I really want to, the main thing I want to focus on here is notice how Tim deployed. I think the way you deployed here, I think is really something I really want to highlight. You didn't run up mid. You went through this corridor and you're kind of sitting around the jungle here. Now, the great thing here as well is that we also have sweeper. So as you can see, Tim's trying to get himself in a position to find an opportunistic man advantage. He's pinging his R. He's vocalizing into his team that he nearly has his R up. He's getting himself in position. We know Sion's a bot. We're trying to find. We're waiting. 5 seconds to R, and then this is where we're going to try and find those creative picks.
Yep, correct. So they spot me right here with the scuttle taking, but I know that Sion's on bot, so I'm happy just hard forcing right here. And with my Teemo and my Kha'Zix actually putting in the multi-thread right here, we actually allow ourselves to get a pretty solid team fight, shutting down the Jinx, getting myself 1k onto Teemo. Even though Sion does get the tier 2 bot, this is actually really good for us because we trade pretty even in this sense. And trading even whenever you're behind like this is something you're very, very happy with.
Yeah, I love that. Really, really creative. I mean, this is a really solid play that just shows an awareness of the win condition. So, you understand that if you play this game in a stock standard way, you're going to lose. Right, you got to inject a little bit of chaos here. So I like it. Really, really good play. Yep. So again, in these lol says Tim, we're thinking the same thing, right? We're thinking, all right, well, we don't have R for 35 seconds. Ideally, what we want to be looking for is some deploy around mid while we buy time for our R to come back up, ensure that we have those right lane assignments. And notice how the game's getting a bit messy. And so this leaves us opportunities to potentially create man advantage plays. Now that Varus is dead, we're probably thinking, interesting. Varus is dead. I wonder if I can leverage that to maybe make another play. So now, because our team's on a position, we use this as an opportunity to kind of get waves out. But this is where I want to see that shoving and move. The shoving and moving again. So that, again, Varus is still dead for 20 seconds. We might be able to make a play. And we also have our empowered TP here. So it'll be interesting to see what Tim does here off this deployment to kind of maybe make something happen.
Correct. So few small things that lead into this particular player. So we know Varus is dead. Elise top, Brown mid, Jinx mid. We have full information except for Sion. I don't know where Sion is. Sion's a problem. So I queue the bush right here because if I get my stacks, if it hits, I know that Sion's in the bush or not. So this is a very important queue because I can still clear the wave with my E like this anyway. Because you don't want to get yourself chunked because then shove and moving is going to be much harder. My plan right now is to, as you can see, Sion was hiding somewhere in the bushes, still avoid the Sion. So the instant moment Sion shows up on bot, I'm getting myself out of this situation. I'm getting myself into a different lane assignment or shove and moving towards mid. If Sion would not have shown up, given the full information I had on the enemy team, I would have been very happy just hitting the tower, waiting until he shows up, then shove and move.
Yeah, really, really good. I love that. And now, again, we're looking for that same shove and move, a potential man advantage. And the great thing about this is that we have our sweeper and we realize we're spotted, but we see Braum low, so we might be able to look for a bit of a pick here. Use the W. We're not afraid to use that W. I love the hold on the R, knowing that it's complete overkill. Really, really, really important.
Yep, absolutely. So in this situation, someone needs to answer to Cyan. I think in this case, I think this was a little bit messy right here. I think I could have done a much better job communicating the lane assignments. We don't really want Smolder to be on bot, and that makes it a little bit awkward right here. But the good thing is that Brown is still dead, and we are still in a position of chaos, so we can potentially look to get an opportunistic pick once again.
Yeah, I love the deployment here. Deploying out of mid again, sweeping. Timo started to become a little bit of a problem. Really, really nice. Again, identifying Jinx as the low target here. Really, really nice R usage. And notice one thing I just want to highlight here, the decisiveness. The reason we're seeing Tim being so decisive is not because it's just like, oh, he's randomly sending it. He's used his lol sees to understand the scenario perfectly. He knew Elise got chunked before. Elise had to reset. He knew that Elise can't be there. And he also knows that, Sion's not in the area. He knew that there were split targets. And because Jinx was low and we can get the reset, we're not afraid to use our W aggressively. So we're starting to see trends here. Again, the lull state usage, identifying split targets, being confident to go in when we know, we have the ability to get the W reset, overloading mid, deploying, out of base through mid, and it's all the same kind of techniques being used here.
Yep, that's absolutely right. One thing I really want to highlight is the micro in this sequence. Is first of all, we use our W in Fog of War. I don't jump over there, I jump over there because this wall is blocking the side. And you got to keep in mind the location of where you land is only where you go invis. So if you jump over walls, you don't instantly become invis. It's over the wall when you then become invis. And this is why I use this wall right here. I used myself a fantastic R, and we see that this Jinx is a good player. She flashes my combo. She fully flashes my combo. But what happens is that Braum does get hit by my Q. Jinx does not get hit by my Q, but Braum does get hit by my Q. So I go back into my R because the Q is onto Braum, and I can therefore redirect it onto Jinx. If I stay on this side, I cannot redirect it. I will never hit Jinx with my Q. So I out-attack plus Q the Jinx, which then will proc my passive, and that's what actually allow me to take up the kill. If you don't play it perfectly like this, you're not going to get this kill in this situation. The micro difference is so important.
Yep, and then you don't get your W reset, and you're potentially in a bit of trouble. So, yeah, I think it's worth noting that, and this is why we play Aurora. We play Aurora to skirmish, and if you're misexecuting the skirmishes, it doesn't matter how good your macro is, doesn't matter how good your map deployments are. You're not really going to feel impactful. So that's why, again, we really recommend that you spend a lot of time on the micro execution, the ability usage, and positioning of those key pivotal fights.
Yep, that's right. So you can see right here, the enemies are dead. We are very good at clearing the waves. We see another beautiful example of opportunistic pick. Elise feels forced to do something because she's losing the Baron. We get ourselves a nice pick, which then also leads to us eventually getting the Baron. In this case, I felt forced to help the Baron. I would have loved to answer to top, but I don't think we could have with how low that my team was and with the very minimum amount of DPS that we actually have in our squad right here. So in this case, we just trade the top tier 2 for the Baron. I reckon it's worth. I'm pretty happy with the trade off, and we instantly disengage after we secure the objective because we don't want any crazy things happening right now because we're sitting on 2.5k gold right here, and also really really big shutdown. So time to disengage, time to reset, take it easy.
Nice. Really, really big.
So for this next deployment, we see the enemies are currently taking the dragon. We do not want to be playing into them right now. We got no R, we're not strong enough, Smolder is dead. So we want to be going towards the opposite side so we can push in top lane really, really deep, and it's going to create us a very big move window. So the shove is the part where we're going to be doing with the lane assignment right now, and the move window will then eventually present itself. Hence is why I go top right here.
Yep. And this is the great thing about this trading of or giving this neutral is that it's going to buy time for our R to come back up. So this is great. And also we have our empowered TP. So just in case a fight happens later on down the line, we have that as an emergency tool here. Ideally, a fight doesn't happen here in an ideal world, because again, we don't really have that adaptability at this exact moment. The
Yep,
great thing
correct.
about this shove here as well that Tim is doing is that someone is going to have to react to this, which means that there is going to be at least temporarily a bit of a man advantage. So looking for these shoves and hover mid, I love this. Beautiful. Instantly ping mid, getting your team excited about potentially making a play mid here. So, really, really good. And love how you're sitting around the edges. So in the lull states, Tim, we're seeing Varaspot, we're seeing Scion. We know we have a man advantage. We've used our lull states. We see what's going on. This is what Aurora can really utilize. So as a result, there might be a potential pick here. Beautiful.
Yep. And this is classic Aurora, right? Towers don't stop you like that. If you see an immobile AD carry like Jinx in this case, in a missed position with your team around you providing you some threat, you can absolutely go for these type of plays. And you see that this is such a tempo killer for the enemy team. This skill, it completely ruins their potential to get vision, get priority on mid, and get any type of control back. So this is an amazing, really, really amazing play for us.
Yeah, really, really beautiful play. And the great thing about this is that, the more tempo and the more control you get with your Aurora, the easier your mid game becomes. Because then you're gonna have more map control. There's gonna be more opportunities. You're gonna have better quality position. It the game kind of plays itself. So now we're in this really nice rhythm where we're the ones that have really wrestled back that map control, and we're just still looking to rinse repeat. I love what you also do here. You just instantly go back to the side lane, utilize the fact that Jinx had to is dead. Now we're creating that same cycle of making someone react to a wave, and then shoving and hovering and looking for opportunities with our R cooldown. It's just the same thing, rinse, repeat.
Yep, absolutely. And I think what I'm doing right here is it's a little bit much, but I know that the Jinx, she's squishy, she is very vulnerable, and I kill her instantly off my RCD right here. But I think it wasn't really the best play, mainly because the full enemy team had a potential window in which that they could collapse onto us right here. So even though in the end I'm gonna die, I trade 1v1, 1-for-1 that is. I don't think it was worth, because I had a pretty big bounty, even though it buys me some time for my team. Best thing to do regarding my teammates' position right here. Look what they're doing. Yana's in base, Teemo's in base. After shoving this wave, I just reset tempo, open up mid, try to make the play right there.
Yep. And you're still going to have a man advantage opportunity, right? Because they're still going to have to react to those waves that you've shoved out, and the Scion is dead. So we
Yep.
didn't, look, at the end of the day, if Jinx here had a giant bounty, maybe an argument could be made for this play. But yeah, we're kind of, it's a little bit much here. We're kind of desynced with our team. And yes, we do get the kill, but because we're not really playing in accordance to our teammates' locations, it's a little bit rough. This is very different to the play from before. Before, Tim was actively playing in accordance to his teammates' location. His Janna and his Smolder was there, ready to go. In this case, not so much. So just worth noting.
Yep. So one of the fun things you can do with the W is you can really fake the enemies out, because you go into a specific direction, you jump in a specific direction, and they think you're going to be walking that direction, but because the invisibility is so long, you can actually change directions. And in this case, you see that the Varus actually almost got caught out by the difference in movement. So, new deployment, new lull state, new map state right here. Few things to keep in mind, right? We are super strong. Dragon's coming up in 210. Going to be a pretty important dragon now. Like, we were able to give two, but this third one is going to be important because it puts us on soul point, or the enemies on soul point, which is a forced fight on the soul, of course. Baron's also coming up, and that means that right now we're in a position where we gotta like really get control around mid lane, because mid lane is the lane that is going to get access to both of these objectives. So that's exactly where I eventually want to put my pressure. I open up through bot side river towards the side that I want to be playing on eventually, to mid, because all mid lane is where I want to control. And this is really where you can get towards Aurora's like identity as the mid-wave murderer, so to say, because this is exactly where you're going to find a lot of these immobile AD carries looking to clear the waves. If you sweep, you know you're not under any kind of vision, right? This is exactly your playground right here.
Okay, so there's a lot of little details here, and I think it's actually important we go over all these details here, Tim.
Okay.
So I think first things first. Um, so notice how Tim doesn't go bot to try and pick the Varus; he goes mid. And this is very important because we need to make sure we're getting control with our team, sweeping that vision, and that will create a future opportunity. Okay, so that's number one. Also, notice how like when he sweeps when he's on the ledge, so he's able to like sweep the ledge, he's able to sweep the side lane mid brush, and he's able to get the banana brush. Now he uses the Scry's bloom, so he sees no ward here either. So now he knows that his Kha'Zix and Janna are in the area. He knows that there's no vision around here, so he knows this is in fog of war. Now, if you play it out from here, what I love about this as well is you don't get bogged down by the Braum. You identify your target. You're not going to one-shot the Braum. You need to get onto either the Jinx or the Varus. So we ignore the Braum, we go straight onto the Varus, and we identify our target. Right. And the great thing about this is that now we've already assassinated one of the key carries, and then boom, we can kind of win the rest of the fight. So this is a culmination of good deployments, great target selection, beautiful sweeper usage, and just really utilizing that fog of war. And so, as you can see, guys, with Aurora, we're not really playing the game in a super conventional way. We're not really playing the game like a lot of other control mages. We're really, we're really trying to play like a bit of an assassin. That's
Yeah.
really what Aurora is.
Yep. She's definitely a bit of an assassin. And this is a very good example as well. Like the mindset that I'm running in these type of situations. I know we still got a lot of time with Braum, Varus, and Elise out. You see, I'm trying to fake out this Jinx right here. Maybe I can put her in a bit of a different direction, but she's playing it well. She understands the threat assessment really well, and that this slightly make the game a little bit chaotic. But in the end, I'm pretty happy hard forcing right here because the enemy team is still dead. As long as we just don't overdo it, we're getting ourselves a nice little dragon upon the back end, which is where Kha'Zix actually turned himself to. And unfortunately, we couldn't end the game, but that's fine. I still recognize, hey, I got my ult coming back up. Teemo's taking the top tier one. What I can do is I can once again look on this squishy, and instantly they're gonna die. Fog of war, fog of war, fog of war.
Yeah, exactly. And it's starting to be a bit of a trend here, right? We're using Fog of War, we're identifying those man advantages, we're sweeping, and it's really paying dividends. And as a result, we've been able to make pick after pick after pick after pick. And even though your team was at a massive disadvantage this game, you fulfilled your champ's identity as that assassin and were really able to really shut down that Jinx and that Varus. So this was not an easy game. This was a very, very impressive game, Tim, and I think it really
Yep.
highlights a lot of Smolder's potential if you have that micro and macro aspect nailed. I think this VOD really exemplifies all of the real key reference points that you guys watching need to really center yourself around. Again, the world's your oyster with Aurora, so we're giving you a framework here. If you are looking to take your Aurora gameplay to the next level, you are going to have to utilize that VOD questions, and you really are going to have to come to coaching sessions. But hopefully, use this framework to give you some semblance of consistency.
Next up, we got ourselves the team fighting section as Aurora. This is going to be the juice of the guide when it comes to micro optimization and really getting max value out of all of Aurora's abilities. We're going to start off with the most important ability in a kit, which is her ult, which is her skirmish and team fighting domination tool. It's one of the, if not the strongest team fighting tool in the game. What do you think?
It's definitely up there. It's definitely in the conversation, right? Easily top five. Um,
Yeah.
Again, because it's such a multifaceted ability. You have, the CC, the slows, you have the repositioning tools, you have the AoE factor, the damage. I mean, there's just a lot of layers to it. I mean, even it's a dash. You could literally use that as a dash as well to go for walls. There's so many, facets to it. I think it's one of those things that, if you understand the basics, that's fine. But as you develop that champ mastery, again, the world's your oyster when it comes to this ability.
Absolutely. When it comes to team fights, no R, no fight. We're so reliant on this ability. This is such a telling ability of our kit that if we do not have this ability up, our team fighting strength and power just halves, if not like even more than that. So really be very conscious about your R cooldown and understand that getting a good R off is really going to be crucial in these fights. So, few things to read when it comes to team compositions as Aurora. A few things where you really got to put your mental stack on when it comes to the game start, but just before the fights in the low states, is number one, what type of multi-threat do you have? Who can follow up on your engages? Who can follow up with your R threat? Do you have teammates that want to peel back? Do you have teammates that want to go in? Maybe you can even be secondary engaged. You don't even have to be primary engaged. That would be even better. A lot of things to lot of things to understand when it comes to multi-threat is that it really makes you understand your role in the fight a little bit better. And another thing to keep in mind is the enemy dashes and self peel. There's going to be champs that you can one shot, going to be champs that you cannot one shot. Magic resist is also a very important factor to keep in mind. Stuff like hex drink and is really going to make you be able to get that W reset off or not. And if they have the dashes, they can just get out of your R, and it's going to make it really hard for you to approach these fights.
Yeah, I'll just say just quickly on this, Aurora's abilities are not easy to land, and if the enemy has dashes, it can be very difficult to land that Q and E, in which case you need to use the W stealth and or following up on other people's CC to really ensure that you land it. So again, that may seem like a very trivial detail, but it actually matters a lot because that can be the difference between you getting your W off or not. Same thing for multi-threat. In games where you have a lot of multi-threat, getting that first reset and then again being able to recast your W completely changes the entire feel of the champion. So just worth noting, not to say Aurora is unplayable in games where you lack multi-threat or when the enemy has a lot of self-build. It just means you need to be a little bit more strategic. You need to be a little bit more, pay attention to detail.
Absolutely right. So this comes to role identification. All of this lull state usage that we do in the previous section right here with understanding the team compositions means that we can find ourselves a little bit of a role. Is our jungle strong? Is it the Hecarim? Maybe we can engage together with him with the multi-threat. Maybe the enemy team has one specific carry that's hyper fed, and our job is to assassinate them. We can do a lot of different things as Aurora. Like our kit gives us so many options. We can also peel for our strong AD carry, play for a reset because of our high burst. We can play to disrupt the enemies with our W and with our R, and just put ourselves in position where we just threaten them and don't really do more. There's so many things you can do. The most important thing to do is that you try to come up with a hypothesis of your fight and just send it based upon your hypothesis. Stuff's gonna work out, stuff's gonna go really, really bad. And your job is to, after this initial hypothesis or the hypothesis of the game, reflect on it. Right. If you think like, hey, I need to play this fight as an assassin and it doesn't work out, and you cannot really find a reason why it didn't work out, chuck it in the VOD questions. I'm happy to give you some feedback on what I would see and how I would be playing these fights. Role identification is a really hard thing, but it's a thing that with good hypothesis and a good process, you'll start to get better at over time.
Yeah, it's a long-term journey. Don't rush it. Take your time. We're here to help you one by one, step by step. We'll get it over a course of your games. And again, posting those screenshots goes a very long way.
Absolutely. So, how to get your damage off and approach a fight is where we're now getting into a little bit of the tricky parts, because the micro execution plays a really big role onto Aurora. I go on a lot of these topics in the ability usage section. And if you guys haven't checked that one out, you must check that one out before you go into this section of the guide, because there's a lot of tools that we're going to be using to make it easier for us to land our abilities. Not only that, there's a lot of tools, we also are very good on flanks. Flanking on Aurora is just the general way we want to be approaching these fights. We can front to back, of course, it is doable, but on the flank, we're just so much stronger, because if you look at, for example, the enemy team composition like this, usually the enemies play either in a formation like that or like that. What's going to happen is that if we come from the flank, it's going to be a lot easier to get onto the enemy carries, right? Visualize the enemy carry right here, potentially right here. If we come from the middle, it's really easy for the enemies to zone us out, make it hard for them to reach the enemies because our R has a cast duration, same as from right here. It makes it a little bit easier. We ideally want to have the beefy boys getting zoned out or threatened by the rest of our team, so we can access the enemies from different angles. It's going to make it a lot easier for us to get onto the real targets that we want to get onto. Let's dive into a few examples. Something you want to add, Curtis?
No, let's get it.
For this first team fight, we've seen this fight before in the mid-game section, but it is a perfect fight to start off with, because this is a fight in which that we play throughout our role, information gathering, and flanks just perfectly. It's a really good showcase of what Aurora can do in these type of situations. So we see that our team is starting the Baron, and we also know that the enemy team is of course looking to contest it. So I'm using this Baron as a little bit of a magnet for a fight. So I know exactly where the fight's going to be playing out because the team is going to be, of course, making it hard for the enemies to enter and get towards this Baron in this situation. So I'm already putting myself in a position where I'm going to be making sure that I'm trying to get onto the flank, get onto the crucial enemy targets. And in this fight, I'm really trying to play around my fog of war so I can get onto this Lucian. This Lucian is the fat member. If I can annihilate the Lucian, we win the fight instantly because he's the only strong member of the enemy team.
Yeah, and I think one thing that you'll see as a trend within these kind of examples, guys, is the setup and the way you initially position is I cannot overstate how important that is going to be because Aurora's not really a champion where you can just casually rock up to a fight and make it work. Otherwise, your abilities, your damage is going to be very easy to avoid. So again, when you guys are reviewing your own gameplay, please put an emphasis on that positioning before the fight.
Absolutely. So right here, we're going to play the fight out, and then we're going to get into the micro details of them because there's a lot of micro details that lead us to win the fight as hard that we actually do. So fight's won. Let's go back. What do I see? I do not have sweeper. I fucked up. Right? That sometimes happens. This is something I struggled with when it comes to the mental stack of my early Aurora games. But I suppose that given the enemy's positioning and the way that they're walking, that I'm actually not under any type of vision or any type of threat because they're not turning onto me or anything like that. They don't seem scared. So my job here is to try to still keep playing into the fog of war. One thing I see is that Zac is now in a position where if I jump over, he will spot me. It will alert the Lucian and the Nami. They'll kite away from me. So a very important thing that I'm doing is I'm waiting until Zac actually gets in a position where he cannot spot me anymore, which is besides this wall ledge right here. So I jump over the wall. He's not into the bush right here where he can spot me. So I'm in full fog of war right here, running into the enemy team. And this is very important because this fog of war is now slightly getting extended by this bush right here, which is once again a position where the enemies currently have no vision on me right here. And this puts me in a position where I can get this really good ult onto the Lucian. He gets completely caught off guard, and I use my R slow to get the Q into the E as a skill shot on top of him, instantly one-shotting him. He's dead. We win the fight.
Yeah, I really, really love that. And I think it's important to note, guys, that if you're not coming from stealth, it's going to be incredibly difficult for you to land your damage. Because if you don't land that slow as well, how are you going to land your Q and your E onto the Lucian? It's just not really going to happen. And what I like about this fight, if we go to when you are, let's say, for example, Lucian sees your R, instantaneously flashes out. It's a win-win scenario. Even if you don't kill Lucian, you're removing the 80 carry from the fight regardless, and then you could just peel back and play the front to back. So the great thing about coming from the side, it gives you that flexibility to peel back or, again, get onto the back line of one shot. So it's like a win-win scenario. So don't tunnel too much. If they flash out, that's okay. Let them flash out. They're out of the fight. They're not going to DPS. So I just think it's worth noting that as well. So really, really clean team fight.
So for this next team fight, we got ourselves in a pretty beautiful position to start off with right here. We see that our team is fully getting collapsed upon by the enemy team. What I just did, I just TP'd in the back right here onto this ward. So I know that the enemies don't have any type of vision on me. I'm in full fog of war. But I did use my W over the wall right here. So I now do not have W up. What's happening is that the enemies are actually chasing into our team. And our team is now collapsing with the Urgot and with the Corki together with me to find this beautiful fight on to the enemies. Let's play it out. Let's see what happens. And let's break down the details. As you can see, it was not the prettiest fight on my end, but we're going to be breaking down why that was the case. And even though I may not have performed my job perfectly, we still managed to win this fight, mainly because of the fact that I did create a lot of space, even though I didn't hit my abilities, so to say.
Yeah, so the first thing, okay, so let's look at the initial engage here, Tim. So
Yep.
let's play out the first section here. So we've got beautiful backline access. Now the first thing to note is that we don't have our W. And that matters a lot, guys. If you don't have your W, it's very, very difficult because again, everyone's going to know where you are. The alarm bells are ringing. Hey, everyone, there's Aurora right there. Let's just turn on the Aurora and kill. So
Yeah.
I think that's problem number one. So if you're ever engaging a fight where you don't have W, that's usually a red flag. You need to investigate why that is the case. Okay, that's the first thing here.
I quickly want to riff off of that, Curtis,
Mm,
is that the very important part about your W is not only the invis, but a very underutilized aspect is the movement speed. The
mm.
fact that you get the movement speed towards the enemies increases your R duration or your R length, so to say, because it's easier to reach them if you're walking at them. In this case, I had neither the invis nor the move speed. So you can see that my R just really falls short if I try to do this on top of them.
Yeah, and I think the second aspect is that you're maybe a little too early as well. Like our team's not fully in position, so you don't really have that max multi-threat. If our Urgot was like right on our tail here, or maybe our Corki were right there, it might have been okay, right? Because then they would be able to follow up, and you might have even been able to get a reset and get your W back off cooldown. So I think that's worth noting as well. The other thing that I
Yep.
want to highlight here is that let's say in an alternate reality team where we did have our W, sometimes when they're high HP, you're not really confident in being able to get the recall, the reset. What you can do is you could flash R here. You can flash R, get the slow, get your QE, then W, and then utilize your R to then bounce onto the other side and reposition. And often that can create a lot of space and buy time for you to get your next W reset. So in scenarios like this, even if we did have our W, I wouldn't agree with starting with W. I don't think this would have actually been a good W start fight. I think this actually, in my opinion, would have been a better flash R, hold W, land your first combo, reposition with W fight. That's just my 2 cents. But again, I think the main thing I do want to highlight here outside of the W is the lack of multi-threat. And if we're not getting that first reset, we're not getting that one shot, fights are going to get ugly.
Absolutely. And this was very funnily enough, guys. This was a game that I actually played this week.
Hmm.
So even after all of my Aurora games and all of my Aurora experience, and I've done a lot of good stuff on this champ, I still fuck up. Like this was bad. It ticked the boxes of bad.
Yeah.
So this is gonna happen. This is gonna happen to everyone. It's gonna happen to you. It's gonna happen to me. And be okay with it, right? The micro execution can sometimes get overwhelming. You may mess up. It's just beautiful learnings in each sequence, and just take them for what it is. So for this next team fight, we've seen this one before as well. There's going to be a team fight around the dragon. Our Jax is there. We're stronger than the enemy team. And this is the classic playground for Aurora. The enemy team tries to contest the dragon. And we see that there's a little bit of a fight happening. And we get ourselves a beautiful ultimate, finishing off the Lucian at the side as well. And eventually, we get ourselves the kills on to both Akali and Zek, winning us this team fight. I really want to highlight a few micro details. What do you see, Curtis?
Yeah, I think the first thing is I love how you start with W and you kind of hide your position. So you actually position into the bush and then use your W to really hide your position to the last second. I really, really love that. So their mental stack, they're not really going to be calculating for you here. I also love how you don't rush your R. You kind of wait for the fight to kind of, I guess give you a little bit more clarity about the positioning of your R before you kind of go ahead and cast it. And what I also like about this whole sequence as well is that you wait till they're nice and low so we can guarantee the reset. So typically Aurora, as a champion, if you see a bunch of low targets, we're rock and rolling. We're happy. Like we know that the fight is going to be good for us because we're going to have plenty of opportunities to reset.
Absolutely. I think you ticked all of the boxes. And I think a final thing to note right here is that I start the fight actually with Q.
Mm.
And that's not something you do that often. But in this case, I came from Fork, Sexy Seed. He's in a position where he cannot really move. If you can guaranteed land a Q, it's really valuable because of the fact that the cooldown is really low and you always get the recast of the Q as well. So you can start proccing your passive, stacking your passive. And it's an ability that sometimes may get dodged in these fights. So if you see guaranteed angle for these abilities, do it, use it. Next team fight, we got ourselves in one of the team fights that we saw in the mid-game sequences as well. Is we see that the enemy virus is dead. We got ourselves R up, and there's a little bit of a skirmish happening. So very opportunistic play right here. And this puts us in a position where we can get this massive R, which really puts us in a fantastic position where we can get back into the game. Fortunately, the fight doesn't end up perfectly, but we're going to be looking at the micro details of this fight. What stands out to you, Curtis?
Yeah. Okay. So first things first, I love how decisive you are with your flash. This was a game that you guys were on the back foot. You saw that there were low targets. You saw that there was chaos, and you needed to get in there. And we really wanted to make sure that even if they were to kind of flash, they're not going to be able to get out of the slow, and your R is going to really cover the choke point. I just love the placement of the R. I think the placement of the R is just really really beautiful. So that's the first thing. The second thing I love is I love that insta W. So again, from their perspective, it's very difficult on their mental stacks to account for where you're coming from here and where you're going to, like what angle you're going to be approaching the fight. Um, Aurora is one of those champions where I feel like you're not super flash reliant, and so you don't need to be super stingy with that flash. You can kind of just go ahead and use it when you really feel like you need to find a window to get back into the game. So yeah, I think that were the major parts. What else stands out to you, Tim?
So I think we go a little bit into this role understanding
Mm,
team comps right here. Is I think a very important thing that was on my mind when I was playing this fight is that Elise is in her human form. And when Elise is in her human form, she does not have access to her repel on E, in which she can self-heal herself. So knowing that I'm playing versus two immobile characters currently, Jinx is somewhere in this area too. I'm not sure where exactly she is because I didn't have full info. I am very happy to therefore recognize that I can play as an assassin right here. If Elise would, for example, be in her spider form or anything like that, or there's any plants or something like that, I would play it a lot slower. But because she is so vulnerable right now, I full send it and I know I can make it work right here.
yeah, really, really, really good. I also love, by the way, just can you play that initial engage again? You actually don't rush your abilities. So what you do is you flash R, you hold, and then you wait, and then you kind of like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes a lot of people, what they do, they just insta rush your abilities. You're not 100% sure if they're going to flash or whatever. So you actually kind of, there's a split second where you do hold your abilities as well, which is worth noting as well. So really really nice, clean team fight.
Yep. And the slow of the R makes it so easy for you to like just position yourself in a line with the enemies and get yourself this beautiful pickup. So we got ourselves another team fight rocking up right here. This is going to be a very messy team fight, and it's going to be a little bit of an elongated section as well, because there's a few micro details that I think are worth covering. So initially, to go a little bit back to context, we get ourselves to top tier 2, pretty far ahead. We're generally in a really good spot in this game. We spot that the enemies have a Zinra, a Samira, an Elise. These are very vulnerable champions, once again. These are champs that do not really have much self-peel against our R. So that puts us in a position where, especially with our multi-threat on our team with the Shaco, the Draven damage, and the Rakan R, we actually can potentially look for a dive angle onto this mid lane turret. It's going to be a bit risky, but if we have good micro execution, we can put it off. So I'm coming from this perfect flank right here. This is the angle. You can see it in this instance right here. The three guys they're lined up together, three squishies. This is it. So I try to find the angle, but I actually miss it with my R. And I think this is a very, very important thing to note is that this R angle is something that a lot of other players will actually mess up as well. Because if we go a little bit back, right, because we got the extended session of the team fight right here, this R angle, R can usually jump walls. But what I thought in my mind is that I could jump over this wall, get an R angle right here, and keep my W available. As Curtis said previously, keeping your W in these type of fights can be very impressive because you can jump into a wall and dash invisibly to the other side, which can be super, super OP because of the fact that it creates so much chaos and error into the enemy's mental stack. The problem was you cannot jump over this big of a wall. They removed this a few patches ago onto Aurora, and you can only jump very, very small walls. So this is a wall you can jump. This wall is too big. So therefore, what happens is that my R actually gets slightly cut short, and it really removes a lot of the damage and CC and disruption ability in these type of fights.
Yeah, I think you raise a really good point, and you can see how hard it is. By the way, even with your art to land that QE, it's not easy. It's not an easy QE to land. They're right at the edge. Even though you do have the slow, they're right at the very edge. And so you can really just see how much we really rely on either catching them off guard and overwhelm their mental stack, or just simply following up on other CC there. So I love that. And this is a real, what I love about this example is that it just really shows how small details go a long way. And that is, we sound like a bit of a broken record, but that's where the complexity with the champion lies. One messed up W or one misplaced R, one missed Q can make all the difference. That's what makes Aurora fundamentally, in my opinion, not a super, I wouldn't say she's the most complex champion in the game, but her skill cap is incredibly high for this reason.
Correct. To foot on, there's a few more micro details here in this case. So we land a beautiful combo onto the Zinra, right? We get ourselves the kill on tour. And right now we have to really analyze how we're going to continue this fight. Because what happens right here is I can reactivate my R, so it disappears, and I can walk out if I want, theoretically. In this case, I decide to continue fighting because I feel like we can actually continue to fight with Shaco and Rakan in the end with his R up. So I actually do take the portal towards the other side. What's on my mind right now, right here? Well, I want to be killing the Elise. Because if I kill the Elise, I get a W reset. And that can put me in a position where I can then kite, retake space, and maybe wait for my cooldowns again. So that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be trying to focus the Elise and trying to create distance between the rest of the enemy team. I eventually do finish her off, and you can see that I'm instantly able to create space, rekite, and reorient myself in this team fight. So the target selection is really important.
And if Elise wasn't low there, we would just disengage because we wouldn't have another target to reset our W1. It's just really worth noting there. This is, again, we need to have very high awareness of the HP bars here because it's all about the resets on Aurora.
That's right. So to continue this fight a little bit more, I think there's a few more important micro details in here. It's actually the importance of just weaving in auto attacks, especially when you're playing versus these beefier champions. Right, the more auto attacks you can get yourself in, the more passive regeneration you're going to be getting, the more damage you're going to be dealing. So if you see this example versus the Orn, I want you to look at how many auto attacks I actually get in. And I really wait until the final moment, the end of the end, until I recast my Q. The lower the enemies are, the more damage they're going to be dealing. So you don't need to put any mental stack on towards recasting your Q in these situations, unless you want the quick kill, because of the fact that you don't want to use it at the last possible time anyway. And you can just get as many auto attacks in as possible, lowering them, making your Q deal more damage, getting as many passive procs in as possible, maximizing your DPS. All right, so next situation right here, we are going to be in a situation where we're going to be playing around the Baron. And we're pretty far ahead with our team. We got ourselves a nice reset composition with Viego, Jinx, and we know that the RE is dead. So knowing that this is going to happen is that I want to start the Baron. I want to use the Baron as a magnet to force a team fight. So I TP in on top to instantly get myself on a flanking position. So when something happens like this, I can instantly look to try to turn onto the enemies and get a fight happening. So this fight is going to go really bad. I'm going to spoil it for you guys already. Like, this is an absolute game thrower. And I do think it's actually good to put it in here just to really highlight some of the things that we talked about in the slide section that I was actually missing in this fight. There's also a good few micro things to talk about, which in this fight as well.
So first things first here, Tim. The way I want you to maybe deconstruct this for the audience here is, what are the key principles? What are the key kind of underlying concepts that are missing here that make this fight go wrong? So the average Aurora player could look at this and be like, you know what? I could see that in my own team fights.
Number one, I don't have R yet. So there's 10 seconds on my R. That means we got to delay a little bit. In hindsight, TPing top wasn't even smart because I don't have R. Better thing to just slow it down, push one more wave, get a little bit more control, then play on my R cooldown. So I'm kind of rushing the play to start off with. That's one thing to note. Another thing to note is that multi-thread, right? Where is my multi-thread currently? I got 3 threatening players hitting the Baron at this exact moment. My trash is not really that threatening. It doesn't deal that much damage, right? He might have Ignite or something like that, but that's it. So that already really limits the amount of like threat that I have as an Aurora, because my R is a multi-threat tool, and in this situation they're just not able to follow up. Simply put.
Yeah, I just want to like maybe interject here a little bit. Something
Yeah.
that it's a smaller detail, but it matters a lot. Is that your build? You haven't opted in for as much of a burst-oriented build. You've opted in for the Leandre second this game, and this
Yep.
really, there's a very big difference. We're going Malignance into Shadowflame versus Malignance into Leandre's, which means that yeah, sure, we have more sustained damage, but it's harder for us to get that one shot. And to be honest, even if we landed that QE and followed up on that CC properly, it wouldn't have one shot anyway. And so the reality is that we're not going to be able to get the W reset here. And now our W is on cooldown for 15 seconds. Right? And that's a massively long cooldown. And we're in Aurora now in the middle of a fight with no W. What the hell are we going to do? We're very limited in how we can continue this fight because that W is such an important cooldown. We've now pissed that away. We're in a very compromised position. Okay. Especially, by the way, especially when we have this particular build, when you're building Leandre's, your W usage is what allows you to kind of get in and out the fight and get multiple rotations and act upon that shred. So I think it's just really worth noting that, sometimes it's best to say no, slow down a little bit, ensure that we can get the reset before popping that W.
Spot on. So Trash is now in a really bad position, right? Trash is out. He's out of the fight. And with the enemies coming in, this Baron call is now too rushed. In the ideal world, I think I call it off right here. This is not something I do. In my mind, it's not something that's clicked yet. And I actually think we can continue fighting. Because I like this corridor, right? Aurora loves this corridor right here. A lot of people packed up in the situation can get a very high value R, very high value other abilities. And the way I'm approaching this fight right now is we're going to mainly look at the micro details right here, because we've recognized that macro is not really ideal. Given my team multi-threat is on the Baron, it's not a good fight with Trash being low anymore and all of the enemies coming in. One thing I do is I queue the plant. And that may sound crazy for a lot of people. Why would you ever queue that plant? Fuck are you using your queue for, Tim? Well, I queue the plant to get a recast queue. Because if this plant, right, it prevents the enemies from entering this zone right here. And that's really interesting because that Q recast actually deals a shit ton of damage if the Zyra runs through. She loses about 400 HP together with Leandre's. So it's actually really smart Q putting onto the plant. But what I actually do is I find this particular angle with my R to hit 3 people. And what also happens is now the recast of my Q actually goes through the Zyra right here and through the Choka. So it's actually pretty high value Q that I got so far. Another thing to keep in mind is that with this recast Q, not only did it hit Zyra and Cho, it also hit the Ahri when I dashed through my R. So this Q actually was mega high value. And then I was able to finish off this Zyra with the 3-hit passive on my Electrocute and passive. The only problem is this is not enough. Yes, I assassinate the enemy jungle. Really good job. They've got a Cho'Gath. So we cannot really flip the Baron. My thought process is I kill Zyra, we flip the Baron, we get out. But the enemy's got a Cho'Gath, so we actually lose the Baron and we lose the fight from that point, really.
And I would say, I mean, I think you did a really good job considering the situation. And the other thing here is that we're not really coming in from the side here. We're also kind of, you're having to like do all these fancy tricks to compensate for our poor positioning. You know what I mean? Like if you're like Tim here is like kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. His team's on Baron. He's committing to the Baron. He's like, well, fuck, I gotta find a creative way to make this work. And he does. He does a really good job of killing the Zyra. But the question that I would ask myself, if you guys are reviewing your team fights, is like, if I feel like I have to bend over backwards to do all this crazy ass shit to kill someone, chances are my setup and my positioning and my initial ability usage is probably wrong. And that's something that you guys, again, this is where that micro macro, when you're getting into the micro, yes, you look at your abilities, but again, that positioning. Now, it's very different. Imagine if we were like in that Krugs pit the entire time or something. It's a completely different scenario. You can completely catch them off guard. You can probably bounce around, get in and out, and create a lot more space. You know what I mean? So just really putting it in context here, I think is really important.
For this team fight, we are starting off the Baron. And the goal is to just get the Baron right here. Want to quickly sneak it. We're 31 minutes into game. It's a very late part of the game right here. And what actually happens is that Yana's dead, Timo's dead, Signs on bot, and we just got ourselves the Baron. Honestly, not too bad. I reckon it's a disengage angle right here. But what actually happens is that the enemy team, like, I see the angle right here, and I get completely baited into going in. Now, this may not initially seem that bad because of the fact that we've been one-shotting this Jinx and this Varus over and over and over again. This is the same game as we spotted in the mid-game sequences. But there's a very important key thing that I didn't realize in the lull state. And that's the fact that Jinx started to build full MR. And you can actually see that when I'm going to be going to the stab right here. And this is a very important thing to realize, is that Jinx got himself a Hex Drinker plus a Spectre Scrowl. This entire fight plays out differently if she does not have these items. Because I can one-shot her, I can get my W reset, I can prevent their DPS. But since Jinx actually has this MR, I cannot really kill her. And this play doesn't really work out the way that I want to. And you can see that Jinx's DPS is eventually killing me in this position and making the fight go really bad.
Yeah, and the logical question people are going to say, oh, but what do I do about that? What's the counterplay? Well, the reality is that you're going to have to look for a different fight. You're going to have to look for either a man advantage play, or you're going to have to be syncing up with your other key damage dealers. In this fight here, your Smolder's not really in position. Kha'Zix doesn't have an amazing angle to engage anyway. It's just not really a super, this is one of those scenarios where the harder the scenario is, whether it be they're stacking MR, you have limited multi-threat, whatever, the more surgical you need to be in your approaches to the team fights. The more squishy they are, and the more multi-threat you guys have, the less surgical you can be. Really, really, blasé with your engage angles, and you're probably going to get away with it. So it's just more about, again, being patient and finding the right opportunity for your particular game. So I love this example because you guys are going to be in this scenario. If you're not using your lull sets and identifying your ability to one-shot someone, or again, get that reset, again, it will single-handedly lose you a team fight.
Absolutely. You don't have to take every fight, right? In this situation, perfect example of not taking the fight would have been better than taking it in this case. And just wait for my team to come back up. You don't have to 1v9 every game. You guys got teammates that you can work with and that they will help you win the game.